I was 24 when my mom yelled those words that still ring in my ears. "You've been nothing but a burden since you were born." I'm Michael, and for as long as I can remember, my family has had a way of making me feel like I was always one step out of place. I grew up in a small house on the edge of town with my mom, dad, and younger sister. We weren't poor exactly, but my parents always made sure I knew that every penny spent on me was a sacrifice. Birthdays, school trips, even a pair of new shoes. There was always a lecture about how lucky I was they hadn't just left me to figure it out on my own. I was the quiet kid, the one who got decent grades, worked after-school jobs, and stayed out of trouble. But to them, none of that counted. My sister could crash the car into the mailbox, and it was kids make mistakes. But if I came home 5 minutes late from my shift at the grocery store, I got a full-blown speech about respect and pulling my weight. Over time, I learned to keep my head down and avoid conflict, but deep down I was boiling. By the time I was 18, I had saved enough to buy a second-hand car. Nothing fancy, just something to get me to work in college. The day I drove it home, my dad didn't congratulate me. He asked why I hadn't used the money to help out with the bills. My mom said, "Must be nice to spend all your money on yourself." That became a theme. Anything I did for myself was selfish. When I paid my own tuition through scholarships and part-time jobs, they called me stubborn for not asking them for help. When I moved back home after graduation to save for a place of my own, they acted like I was freeloading. Even though I paid rent, bought my own food, and fixed things around the house without being asked. It wasn't one big fight that made things snap. It was years of little moments stacking up until the weight became unbearable. My sister, now 21, still lived at home too, but she was treated like a guest of honor. She didn't pay rent. She didn't clean. She used my tools without asking, borrowed money from me without paying it back, and left her dishes in the sink like it was someone else's job. When I mentioned it once, my mom sighed and said, "She's just figuring things out, Michael. Don't be so harsh." Meanwhile, if I so much as left my work boots by the door, it was a lecture about respecting the house. The night things started to unravel was a Thursday. I had just come home from a brutal shift, 12 hours on my feet, dealing with an inventory nightmare at the warehouse. I barely had time to drop my bag when my mom called from the kitchen. "Michael, we need to talk." Those 4 words never meant anything good. I walked in to see her standing there with her arms crossed, my suitcase already by the door. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice already tight. She didn't even hesitate. "You've been nothing but a burden since you were born," she said, like she was just stating a fact. My dad was leaning against the counter, silent but nodding. My sister was sitting on the couch, scrolling on her phone like this was a reality show she had front-row tickets to. I tried to keep calm. "I pay rent. I fix things around here." You have an attitude." My mom cut me off. "You think you're better than us because you pay for things. If you're so independent, then be independent somewhere else." And then she picked up my bag, dragged it outside, and dropped it on the lawn. "Go be someone else's problem." I wish I could say I yelled back, that I said something clever or dramatic. But I didn't. I just stared at them for a long moment, grabbed my keys, and walked out. No goodbye, no slam of the door, just silence. That night, I slept in my car in a grocery store parking lot, staring at the ceiling and wondering how it had come to this. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I kept replaying her words over and over. Nothing but a burden. It hurt in a way I can't even describe, not just because she said it, but because I believed it for a second. The next few weeks were rough. I stayed with a friend from work, crashing on his couch while I figured out my next move. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from home, I ignored it. I couldn't face them, not yet. I threw myself into work, picked up extra shifts, and started quietly building a plan for my future. Then, exactly 3 weeks later, my phone lit up with a call from my dad. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. His voice was panicked. "Michael, why is the bank taking our house?" My heart pounded. I hadn't done anything, not directly, but I knew what he was talking about, and I knew exactly what I was going to say. I hung up without explaining, typed out a single text, and hit send. Ask the burden. I could practically feel the silence on the other end of the line, and that was when everything truly started to fall apart. 3 days after I sent that text, ask the burden, the calls started coming one after another. First dad, then mom, Then even my sister, who never called me unless she needed something. I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to hear their voices. The voicemail notifications piled up, each one more desperate than the last. At first it was yelling, "Michael, what did you do?" Then it was pleading, "We just need to talk." Eventually, it turned into guilt trips. "You can't turn your back on your family when we need you most." I kept my phone on silent and went to work like nothing had happened. But inside, my thoughts were a mess. A part of me wanted to drive over there, sit them down, and explain everything. The other part, the bigger part, felt like I finally had a little bit of power. For once, they were the ones scrambling. For once, they were the ones feeling the weight of their decisions. I hadn't expected things to spiral this fast. 3 weeks ago, I was paying rent, quietly patching holes in the drywall, and unclogging the shower drain. 3 weeks ago, I was helping keep that house running. I'd been the one making sure the mortgage payments got sent in on time, because somewhere along the line my parents had started leaving their mail unopened and letting due dates slip. I wasn't on the mortgage, but I had access to their online account because they didn't understand how to set up autopay. Every month, I'd log in, transfer money from my account, and make sure the payment went through. I told myself it was just temporary, just until things got better. When they kicked me out, I stopped paying. Simple as that. I figured they'd notice and take over. I didn't expect them to ignore it for nearly a month. By the end of that first week after Dad's call, the tone of their messages had shifted. My mom left a voicemail that said, "We wouldn't be in this mess if you hadn't been so dramatic. You could have just stayed and helped us like a normal son." That one made me laugh out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Even now, she still saw me as the problem, not the fact that they'd thrown me out with no warning. I didn't reply, but I did start hearing things from other relatives. My Aunt Caroline, who I'd always been close with, called me one night. "Honey, your mom told the family you abandoned them when they needed you," she said gently. "She's saying you're selfish, that you cut them off to punish them." "Did she mention that she threw my stuff on the lawn and told me to leave?" I asked. There was a pause. "No," my aunt admitted. "She left that part out." I sighed, rubbing my forehead. Figures. That was the thing about my parents. They were experts at rewriting the story so that they came out looking like the victims. When my sister failed a class in high school, it was somehow my fault because I didn't help her enough. When Dad's car broke down, I was blamed for not reminding him to get an oil change. And now, losing the house was being pinned on me for not swooping in to save them. 2 weeks passed, and I started hearing about the house from neighbors too. Apparently, the bank had put a notice on the front door. Word spread fast in a neighborhood like ours. My sister posted something vague and dramatic on Instagram. A black screen with white text. "Can't believe how heartless some people are. Family is supposed to be there when you need them." The comments were full of her friends saying things like, "Stay strong, queen," and "Whoever hurt you doesn't deserve you." I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. But that weekend, I made the mistake of going back to grab a few boxes from the garage. My tools, some winter clothes, a box of old photos. I figured it would be quiet, middle of the afternoon, everyone usually out. I was wrong. When I pulled into the driveway, my mom was sitting on the porch. She didn't even wait for me to get out of the car before starting in. "So you can show up to take your junk, but you can't answer the phone?" I kept my voice calm. "I came to get my stuff. That's all." "You're tearing this family apart, Michael," she snapped. "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Your sister can't sleep. We could be out on the street any day now, and you don't even care." I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep my composure. I cared for years. I paid bills that weren't mine. I kept this house afloat while everyone else ignored what was happening. And the one time I needed a place to stay, you threw me out. She crossed her arms, eyes cold. "Because you were disrespectful. You think money makes you better than us." I laughed bitterly. "No, Mom. I think actions have consequences. You wanted me gone. Well, I'm gone." Before she could reply, my sister came out of the house, holding her phone like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Wow," she said loudly, rolling her eyes. "So you really don't care if we lose everything?" I stared at her, stunned by how casual she sounded. "Lose everything? You mean the house you don't pay a dime toward? The bills you never touch? The food you eat that someone else buys?" "Stop being dramatic," she shot back. "It's not just about money. It's about family." I felt something in me snap. "Family," I repeated, my voice rising. "Family doesn't throw you out like trash because you asked for a little respect. For a moment, there was silence. My mom's face turned red, and I could see the vein in her temple throbbing. "You are not welcome here anymore," she hissed. I nodded slowly. "Good," I said quietly, "because I'm done trying." I grabbed my boxes from the garage, loaded them into my car, and left without another word. My hands were shaking as I drove away, but under the anger was something else, a strange, cold clarity. For years, I'd been the one trying to fix things, trying to keep the family together. But maybe it wasn't my job anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the porch argument in my head, my mom's voice echoing in the silence. I wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue, all the times I'd let things slide just to keep the peace. Maybe it was time for the peace to break. And then something happened that turned everything from tense to explosive. A letter arrived at my friend's place, forwarded from my old address. It was from the bank, addressed to me. And when I opened it, my heart stopped. When I tore open that letter from the bank, I expected the usual, some generic notice about a missed payment or maybe a final reminder about the mortgage. But as soon as my eyes scanned the first paragraph, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a generic reminder. It was a foreclosure warning addressed not just to my parents, but with my name printed right there next to theirs. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of clerical mistake. I'd never signed anything related to the house, or so I thought. But as I kept reading, I saw my name listed as a co-signer on the mortgage. My signature was at the bottom of the attached document, plain as day. My first reaction was confusion. I racked my brain trying to remember ever agreeing to this. Then I felt a wave of ice-cold anger. I knew that signature. It was mine, but not from signing a mortgage. It was from a completely different form I had signed almost 2 years ago, when my parents had asked me to help them out by co-signing for a small home improvement loan so they could fix the roof. Except this wasn't just the roof loan. This was the full refinanced mortgage on the house. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the pages. I saw the dates, the loan amount, the interest rate, much higher than I ever would have agreed to. And that's when the realization hit me like a freight train. My parents had refinanced the house in my name, without telling me what I was actually signing. I couldn't breathe for a second. It felt like someone had kicked me in the chest. All those months I'd been paying the mortgage to help out. I hadn't just been doing them a favor. I'd been paying off a debt that legally had my name attached to it. I felt sick. I grabbed my phone and called Aunt Caroline. She picked up on the second ring. "Aunt Caroline," I said, my voice trembling. "Did you know my parents refinanced the house in my name?" There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "I was afraid you'd find out." I sat up straighter. "You knew?" "I knew they refinanced, yes. Your mom said you agreed to help. She told everyone how proud she was that you were stepping up for the family. I assumed you knew exactly what you were signing." My throat tightened. I didn't know. I thought I was signing a small repair loan. They tricked me. Caroline sighed. "Michael, I'm so sorry. They've been drowning financially for years. Your dad made some bad investments, and your mom didn't want to lose the house. I think they thought you wouldn't notice." "I noticed," I said bitterly. After we hung up, I just sat there staring at the letter. My thoughts were spinning so fast it felt like my brain couldn't keep up. Every memory from the past 2 years suddenly looked different under this new light. My parents' smugness when I announced I had paid off my car. Their insistence that I handle the online payments. The way my mom would say, "Don't worry about the details, just sign here." It was betrayal, pure and simple. They hadn't just disrespected me. They had used me. I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing the small living room of my friend's apartment, letter in hand, rage boiling just under the surface. By morning, I knew I had to confront them. When I pulled into the driveway later that day, there was a moving truck parked outside. My sister was sitting on the porch steps, crying into her phone. My mom was pacing the yard, shouting at someone on speakerphone. My dad was nowhere to be seen. "Michael," my mom barked when she saw me. "Finally, you have to fix this. They can't take our house, your house. You're on the mortgage." I held up the letter. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I know." She blinked, thrown off for a second. "Then you understand. We're all in this together. You have to help us." "No," I said flatly. "I don't. You lied to me. You tricked me into signing this." She narrowed her eyes. "Tricked you? We didn't trick you. We asked for your help. We told you it was important. You told me it was a roof loan." I shouted. "You didn't tell me you were putting my name on a mortgage worth $200,000. Do you have any idea what that does to my credit? To my future? She waved a hand like I was being dramatic. It's just paperwork. We needed you. You're our son. That's what family does. No, I said again, louder this time. Family asks. Family doesn't forge trust and hope nobody notices. Do you even realize you could have ruined my life if I hadn't caught this? My sister stood up, glaring at me through her tears. You're being selfish. If you cared about us at all, you'd help. You'd make the payments. You're letting us get thrown out on the street. Something in me snapped. You think I haven't been helping? I shouted. I've been paying your bills for months. I paid the mortgage while you two were out getting new phones and going on weekend trips. And what do I get in return? You toss me out like garbage and then act shocked when I stop cleaning up your mess. My mom's face twisted with anger. You ungrateful little. Ungrateful. I cut her off. I co-signed a house I don't even own. I kept this place afloat while you pretended everything was fine. And you still had the nerve to call me a burden. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Finally, she said, if you don't pay, we'll lose everything. I stared at her, my hands still shaking. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you threw me out. I turned and walked back to my car. My mom shouted after me. My sister cried louder, but I didn't stop. As I drove away, my chest was tight, not just with anger, but with something sharper, heavier. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal. They hadn't just taken my money. They had taken my trust, my security, my peace of mind. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive them for it. Driving away from that house felt like tearing off a bandage and realizing the wound underneath was still raw, still bleeding. I parked my car at a gas station a few miles away and just sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. My anger had burned hot, but now it was being replaced by something heavier, a hollow kind of ache that sat right in my chest. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the look on my mom's face when I told her I knew about the mortgage. Not guilty, not ashamed, just angry that I wasn't still playing along. For years, I'd believed that if I worked hard enough, if I kept paying rent and doing chores and being the good son, they'd eventually see me as an equal. But that moment proved they never had. I'd just been convenient. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. At work, I could keep it together. I threw myself into my shifts, taking every bit of overtime I could get. But the second I was alone, everything hit me like a wave. I'd lie awake at night on my friend's couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my own parents could sign me onto a $200,000 mortgage without telling me, wondering what else they'd done behind my back. And then came the calls from the bank. I ignored them at first, terrified of what they might say. But one afternoon, I finally picked up. Mr. Johnson, the voice on the other end said, we're calling regarding the delinquent mortgage on 1247 Ridgeway Lane. We've attempted contact with the other signers, but you're the only one who's responded. Are you planning to bring the account current? I felt like my throat was closing. I can't, I admitted. I don't live there anymore. I didn't even know I was on the mortgage until recently. The woman on the line sighed like she'd heard this 1,000 times. Unfortunately, as a co-signer, you're legally responsible for the debt. If the account is not brought current, this will proceed to foreclosure. This will impact your credit score and could result in legal action. When I hung up, I felt sick. My credit was one of the few things I had going for me. It was the reason I'd been approved for my car loan, the reason I'd been able to rent my apartment after college before moving back home. And now it was about to get wrecked because of something I never agreed to. I didn't tell anyone about the call, not even Aunt Caroline. I just went quiet. I started skipping lunch breaks at work to save money, funneling every spare dollar into my savings account. I stopped going out with friends, stopped buying anything that wasn't strictly necessary. I knew I couldn't fix the house situation, not by myself, but I could at least prepare for whatever came next. One night, after another late shift, I sat in my car outside the warehouse and let myself cry for the first time in years. Not just from anger or frustration, but from grief. I was grieving the family I thought I had. The version of my parents who cared about me more than their own pride. The home that I had worked so hard to keep together, thinking it was worth saving. I thought about driving back and trying one more time to reason with them. Maybe if I explained how this would destroy my credit, they'd understand. But then I remembered my mom's voice on the porch. It's just paperwork. We needed you. There had been no apology, no regret. just entitlement. So I stayed away. Weeks passed. The foreclosure process moved forward. I started getting more letters, this time addressed directly to me. Legal notices, credit warnings, statements showing how much was past due. Every envelope was another reminder that my life was being dragged into chaos by people who hadn't spoken a kind word to me in months. I stopped answering my parents' calls completely. Eventually, they stopped calling too. But then came a text from my sister. "Hope you're happy. We have to be out by the end of the month. Mom says you ruined everything." I stared at it for a long time before putting my phone down. At work, my boss noticed I was quieter than usual. One night, he pulled me aside. "You okay, man? You've been off lately." I hesitated, then told him a little about what was going on. Not everything, just enough. He shook his head. "That's rough. But you know what? You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. If they put you in this position, that's on them." His words stuck with me, and that was when something in me started to shift. Instead of feeling helpless, I started making lists, literal lists, of what I wanted my life to look like in a year. Where I wanted to live, how much I wanted to have saved, the kind of job I wanted. It was the first time in months I felt like I had a little control. I started applying for better-paying positions at other warehouses. I cut ties with anyone who tried to guilt-trip me about the house situation. I even opened a separate bank account and moved my savings into it, just to make sure there was no chance my parents could get access the way they had before. But the biggest thing I did was start quietly gathering every piece of documentation I had. Copies of the mortgage papers, screenshots of the payments I had made, even old text messages where my mom had asked me to sign just a small loan. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with them, but I knew I needed to have them. By the time the end of the month rolled around, the house was officially in foreclosure. My parents had to leave. I didn't go to help them pack. I didn't even drive by to watch. But one evening, Aunt Caroline called me. "They're moving into your uncle's basement for now," she said. "Your mom is furious. She says you abandoned them." I swallowed hard. I didn't abandon them. They abandoned me first. Caroline was quiet for a moment. "I know, and I think deep down they know it too." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at the stack of documents I had collected, feeling the anger simmering under the surface. Losing the house wasn't the end of this, not for me. I still had a credit score in freefall, still had my name tied to a debt that wasn't mine. And for the first time, I started to think not just about surviving, but about making sure this never happened again, to me or anyone else. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this like it was nothing. The foreclosure officially went through about 6 weeks later. I didn't even have to check online. The moment it happened, my phone buzzed with a flood of messages from my parents. Angry ones, desperate ones, even a few that tried to play the victim card. But by then, something inside me had shifted. Instead of crumbling under the guilt like I would have a year ago, I felt oddly calm. Maybe it was because I had been expecting this outcome for weeks. Maybe it was because I had spent so many late nights staring at the ceiling, imagining all the worst-case scenarios, and now that the worst had actually happened, I was still here, still breathing, still standing. And standing was enough to start building again. I had been secretly applying to jobs outside of my small town, places where I could start fresh. One morning, after a grueling overnight shift, I got an email that made my heart leap. A warehouse management position 2 towns over wanted to interview me. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step up, salaried, with benefits, and most importantly, far away from the place where I had been made to feel like I didn't belong. I prepped for that interview like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. I researched the company, rehearsed my answers, even borrowed a proper button-down from my friend so I'd look professional. When the day came, I drove out there nervous but determined. The interview went better than I could have hoped. They were impressed by my experience, the fact that I had been running inventory systems practically by myself at my last job. A week later, I got the call. I was hired. That was the first real win I'd had in months, and it felt like a dam breaking. Suddenly, there was momentum in my life again. With the higher salary, I was able to get my own apartment, small, but mine. No couch surfing, no relying on anyone else's goodwill. I furnished it slowly, one paycheck at a time. A thrift store table, a secondhand couch, a decent mattress. Every piece I brought into that space felt like a declaration. This is my life now. This is my home. I also started repairing the damage to my credit. I sat down with a financial advisor, explained the whole nightmare, and together we worked out a plan. It wasn't quick. Nothing about rebuilding credit ever is. But there was something deeply satisfying about taking control of it. Every time I made an on-time payment on my small personal credit card, every time I saw my score inch up a few points, it felt like reclaiming a little piece of my future. And through it all, I didn't speak to my parents. Not once. They tried, of course. At first, it was angry texts. Then it turned into guilt trips. "We just want our family back. Your sister misses you. We can't believe you'd hold a grudge over something so small." That one made me laugh. So small? Signing me onto a massive mortgage without telling me and then throwing me out of the house was apparently a small thing. Eventually, they stopped reaching out altogether. And you know what? The silence was peaceful. As the months passed, I threw myself into my new job. I worked hard, learned everything I could, and before long I was promoted again, this time to oversee a team. It felt strange at first, having people look to me for guidance, but I realized I was good at it. I'd spent years managing chaos at home, juggling responsibilities no one else wanted. Now I was being paid to do it and respected for it. For the first time in my life, I started to feel proud of myself, not just for surviving, but for building something on my own. I didn't broadcast any of it to my family. No social media posts, no updates. But I heard through the grapevine that my parents had moved into a small rental apartment and that things were tense between them. Apparently, the foreclosure had driven a wedge into their marriage. Dad blamed Mom for refinancing. Mom blamed Dad for losing his job, and both of them blamed me for abandoning them. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I reconnected with a few old friends I hadn't seen since high school. People who remembered me before all the drama weighed me down. One of them, a guy named Drew, introduced me to a mentor of his who worked in logistics consulting. That connection eventually led me to start taking night classes in supply chain management. It was grueling, balancing work and school, but for the first time, every step forward felt like it was mine. By the end of the year, I had enough savings to pay off my car completely and start an emergency fund. I even started thinking about buying a small condo one day, under my name and my name only. It was around this time that my sister tried to reach out again. She sent me a long, rambling message about how hard things had been, how she wished we could go back to the way things were. I almost replied, almost. But then I remembered standing on that porch, her calling me selfish while I was trying to hold everything together. I left the message on read. Still, her reaching out stirred something in me. Not guilt, not anymore, but resolve. Because while I had moved on, the legal mess was still technically tied to me. The foreclosure was still on my record, still dragging my credit down, still a reminder of how easily my life could be wrecked by someone else's decisions. And every time I saw it listed on my credit report, the anger came back. So I started researching. I spent late nights reading about cosigner fraud, about predatory lending, about what legal recourse people had when their signature was misused. I learned more about mortgages in 2 weeks than I had in the previous 2 years combined. I even scheduled a consultation with a lawyer just to see what my options were. The lawyer confirmed what I already suspected. If I could prove that I had been misled about what I was signing, that I had been told it was a small repair loan when it was actually a full mortgage refinance, I might have a case. Maybe not to undo the foreclosure, that ship had sailed, but to have the debt legally removed from my record. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time, money, and a lot of documentation. But I had all three now. And that's when I realized I wasn't just going to rebuild my life. I was going to make sure that what they did to me followed them, legally, financially, and socially, until they had to face it. For months, they had made me feel powerless. But now I had something they didn't expect. Leverage. The first step in my plan wasn't dramatic. No confrontation, no heated arguments. It was quiet, methodical, and almost boring. But it was also the most important thing I'd ever done for myself. I started by gathering every single piece of evidence I could find. Old texts from my mom, screenshots of my bank transfers, copies of the emails confirming I had made the mortgage payments for months. I even dug up a voice message she'd left me around the time of the refinance saying, "Just sign it, Michael. It's nothing big, just for the roof." I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it was a crucial piece of proof that I'd been misled. The bank statements were the hardest to look at. Each one was a reminder of just how much money I had poured into that house while being told I wasn't doing enough. It made me angry all over again, but it also fueled me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about setting the record straight and making sure no one could ever use me like that again. I organized everything into folders on a USB drive and backed it up in 3 separate places: my laptop, the cloud, and a secure external hard drive. I wasn't going to risk losing any of it. Then I started making calls. The lawyer I had consulted with months earlier remembered me immediately. "Ah, you're the one with the co-signed mortgage situation," he said. "Did you decide to pursue it?" "Yes," I said simply. "And I have proof now." He had me come into the office with all my documents. We spent nearly 2 hours going through everything, line by line. By the end, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "This is strong," he said. "You can absolutely make a case that you were misled. At the very least, you could get this off your credit report. At most, you could sue for damages." I didn't even hesitate. "Let's do it." Over the next few weeks, we filed the necessary paperwork: a formal dispute with the credit bureaus, a complaint with the bank's fraud department, and finally, a demand letter to my parents, informing them that unless they were willing to come to the table and negotiate a settlement, I would be pursuing legal action. That letter wasn't meant to scare them. It was meant to make them take me seriously. And judging by what happened next, it worked. A week after the letter was delivered, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was my dad. "What are you trying to do to us?" he said without even saying hello. His voice was tight, angry. "I'm trying to get my name cleared," I said calmly. "You signed me onto a mortgage without my knowledge. You ruined my credit. I'm just fixing what you broke." "You're going to bankrupt us," he snapped. I almost laughed. "You already bankrupted yourselves. I'm just making sure I don't go down with you." He started to argue, but I cut him off. "You have 30 days to respond to the letter. Talk to your lawyer." And then I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one in control. Around this time, my life outside of the legal battle was thriving more than ever. My new job had turned into something of a passion for me. I had been promoted again, this time to operations coordinator, which meant I wasn't just running a warehouse. I was helping design systems that made the entire supply chain run smoother. The company even paid for me to take a certification course, which would open the door to even higher positions down the line. And with the higher paychecks, I was able to accelerate my financial recovery. I paid off my remaining debts, built up a proper emergency fund, and even started investing a little each month. Watching my accounts grow was satisfying in a way that was hard to put into words. For so long, money had been a source of tension and guilt. Now it was a symbol of freedom. One night, as I was going through some final paperwork with my lawyer, he said something that made me pause. "You know, Michael, cases like this are rare because most people don't have the courage to stand up to their own family. They just take the hit and move on." I thought about that as I drove home. He was right. The old me would have done exactly that. I would have taken the hit, shouldered the blame, and kept paying for mistakes that weren't mine. But not anymore. The last piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. I got an email from the bank saying they had completed their investigation and determined that I had, in fact, been misled during the refinance process. They couldn't undo the foreclosure, but they agreed to remove the mortgage from my credit history and issue me a letter stating that I was not financially responsible for the remaining debt. It was the vindication I had been waiting for. But I wasn't done. I knew that letter would be a powerful tool, not just for clearing my name, but for proving to anyone who doubted me that I hadn't been the villain in this story. And part of me, a big part, wanted my parents to see it. Wanted them to know that their attempt to control me had failed. I decided to wait, to time things carefully. There was a family reunion coming up in a few months, the first big one since the house was lost. Everyone would be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The perfect audience. I started quietly preparing for that day, printing copies of the letter, compiling a simple timeline of events, even organizing the proof into a binder. I wanted to be ready if, no, when, they tried to spin the story again and make me out to be the selfish son who abandoned them. Every step of preparation felt like reclaiming a little more of the dignity I had lost. By the time the reunion drew near, I was no longer the broken kid they had kicked out. I was calm, collected, and fully in control. And I was ready to show them exactly what the burden had become. The reunion was held at my Aunt Caroline's place, a sprawling backyard barbecue that, in past years, had been the highlight of my summer. As I pulled up in my car, I felt a strange mix of nerves and calm. My binder sat on the passenger seat, neat and organized, a physical reminder that I wasn't here to fight. I was here to tell the truth, once, clearly, and without apology. When I stepped out of the car, I saw my mom right away. She was standing near the grill with my dad, both of them looking a little more weathered than the last time I'd seen them. My sister was there too, sitting on a lawn chair with a soda in her hand, scrolling her phone like nothing had changed. For a brief moment, I wondered if they thought today would be business as usual, that I would just show up, pretend nothing happened, and go along with the family narrative. Not this time. I made my rounds, greeting relatives I hadn't seen in months. Most of them were polite but curious. A few gave me the kind of sympathetic smile that told me they'd heard my parents' side of the story. I didn't rush to explain myself. I just smiled, shook hands, and waited. The turning point came, as I knew it would, when someone inevitably brought up the house. "So, Michael," my Uncle Ben said casually over a plate of ribs, "your mom was telling us about the foreclosure. Tough break, huh?" My mom, who was sitting 2 chairs away, nodded solemnly. "Yes," she said, loud enough for half the yard to hear. "It was the hardest thing we've ever been through. Losing the house, having to move, and all because Michael decided to walk away when we needed him most." There it was, the narrative I'd been waiting for. I felt the entire table glance at me, waiting for my reaction. My dad crossed his arms. My sister smirked like she expected me to squirm. But instead, I calmly set down my drink, reached into my bag, and pulled out the binder. "I'm glad you brought that up," I said evenly, "because there's something everyone here should know." The yard went quiet. Even the kids stopped running around. I opened the binder to the first page, a copy of the mortgage document with my signature on it. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the mortgage on my parents' house. Notice how my name is right there as a cosigner." A few relatives frowned. One of my cousins asked, "Wait, you were on the mortgage?" "Yes," I said, "except when I signed this. I was told it was for a small home improvement loan to fix the roof, not a full mortgage refinance for over $200,000. I didn't even know I was legally responsible until months later when the bank started calling me." My mom's face flushed. "Michael, this is not the place." "Actually," I interrupted gently, "this is exactly the place. Because for the past year, I've been painted as the son who abandoned his family. But here's the truth. I was the one making the mortgage payments for months while everyone else ignored the bills. I was the one who got kicked out, literally had my bags thrown on the lawn after being called a burden. And I was the one left holding the bag legally when everything fell apart." I flipped to the next page, a screenshot of the bank's letter clearing me of responsibility. "This," I said, passing it to Aunt Caroline, "is the letter I received after the bank completed their fraud investigation. They confirmed that I was misled about what I was signing and removed the mortgage from my credit record. In other words, I am not the reason the house was foreclosed. I am not the reason they lost everything. I was a victim of what they did, not the cause." There was a long silence. My dad shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. My sister was staring at the grass like she wanted to disappear. Finally, my uncle looked at my mom. "Is this true?" he asked. My mom opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, she didn't have a quick excuse or a clever deflection. I let the silence hang for a beat before continuing. "I'm not here to fight," I said, my voice calm. "I just want everyone to know what really happened. I spent years cleaning up other people's messes, paying bills that weren't mine, and being told I wasn't doing enough. That stops now." With that, I closed the binder, slid it back into my bag, and stood. "I won't be staying for dinner," I added quietly. "But I hope this clears things up." I started to walk toward my car, but halfway there, I heard someone call my name. It was Aunt Caroline. "Michael," she said softly, catching up to me. "I'm proud of you. You handled that with grace." I nodded, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "Thanks. I just needed them to hear it." When I got into my car and closed the door, I saw the whole yard still frozen in that stunned silence. For once, no one had anything to say. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not just relief, but power. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't lashed out. I hadn't stooped to their level. I had simply told the truth and let it sit there, undeniable. And judging by the looks on their faces, it had landed exactly the way I hoped it would. But the best part wasn't the silence, or the looks, or even the vindication. It was knowing that from this moment on, the story of what happened wasn't just theirs to tell. It was mine too, and I wasn't done telling it. Driving home from that reunion felt different than any other drive I had ever taken from a family event. There was no knot in my stomach, no rehearsing comebacks I wished I'd said, no guilt weighing me down. Just a deep, still calm, like the kind that comes after a storm passes. But the real fallout didn't happen until the next day. I woke up to a string of messages on my phone, some from extended family, some from numbers I didn't even recognize. Most of them were short, didn't know all that. Good for you. Or proud of you for standing up for yourself. My cousin Jake even sent me a screenshot of the family group chat. In it, my mom had written, "Michael ambushed us at the reunion and humiliated us in front of everyone." But then one by one, relatives started replying. "He didn't humiliate you. He told the truth. You can't blame him for this. Honestly, you should apologize." By the time I scrolled to the end, even Aunt Linda, who had always been my mom's biggest defender, had chimed in with, "You've been blaming Michael for too long. Maybe it's time you took a look at yourselves." I can't lie, seeing that made me smile. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my dad. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. There was a long pause on the other end. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "We didn't expect you to come prepared like that," he admitted. "You made us look bad." "You made yourselves look bad," I said calmly. "All I did was show people what actually happened." Another pause. "Your mother," he hesitated. "She's upset. Says she didn't mean to hurt you." I let out a dry laugh. "You don't accidentally put your son on a mortgage without telling him. That wasn't an accident. That was a choice." He didn't argue. "I'm not asking for an apology," I said. "I don't need one. I just need you to stop blaming me for your decisions. I'm done carrying that weight." And then I ended the call. For weeks afterward, I didn't hear from them. No texts, no calls, nothing. Part of me expected another guilt trip, but instead, there was just silence. And slowly, word started getting back to me that my parents were keeping to themselves, that they were embarrassed about what happened at the reunion. My sister apparently deleted that dramatic Instagram post she'd made months earlier, and according to Caroline, she'd been avoiding the topic altogether whenever people asked. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no epic showdown. Just a quiet, undeniable shift. For once, I wasn't the family scapegoat. Life moved on. Within a few months, I got another promotion at work, this one putting me in charge of a regional team. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment, bought a better car, and even started traveling a little on the weekends. My credit score climbed back into the green, and eventually I started seriously looking at buying a condo. This time, every document I signed would be double-checked, triple-checked, and completely mine. One Saturday morning, I ran into my sister at a coffee shop in town. It was awkward at first. We hadn't spoken since the reunion. But to my surprise, she approached me. "Michael," she said quietly, fiddling with her cup, "I just wanted to say, you were right." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "All of it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom and Dad, they should have told you. They shouldn't have put you on that loan. I was just going along with them because I didn't want to get involved. But you didn't deserve what happened." I studied her for a moment. There was no smirk this time, no eye roll. She actually looked sorry. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means more than you know." We didn't hug. We didn't suddenly become best friends. But there was something healing about that moment, a tiny crack in the wall that had been between us for so long. The final piece of closure came a few months later when I got an envelope in the mail, a handwritten letter from my mom. It was short, just a page and a half. She admitted that they had been desperate to save the house and hadn't thought through what they were asking of me. She said she was sorry for the way she treated me the night she threw me out, and that she hoped, someday, we could rebuild our relationship. I didn't cry when I read it, but I did sit there for a long time staring at the page. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the closest thing to one I had ever gotten from her. I wrote back a few days later. My response was simple. "I'm glad you're starting to see things clearly. I've moved on, and I hope you do too. But I won't put myself back in a situation where I'm treated like less than family. If we rebuild this, it has to be on equal ground." I never got a reply, but that was okay. I didn't write it for her. I wrote it for me. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to their chaos. I wasn't cleaning up their mess. I wasn't trying to earn their approval. I was living my life on my terms. And when I finally closed that letter and set it aside, I smiled. A small, private smile, and whispered to myself, Ask the burden now. Then I went back to living.
My fiancé demanded, delete every female contact or the wedding is off. I said, consider them deleted. Then I deleted her too and married her maid of honor. She found out when the wedding invitations arrived with the same date but different bride. The venue said they'd never seen someone faint in their office before. I, 28 male, just married the love of my life last month. Plot twist. It wasn't the woman I was engaged to 6 months ago. Let me rewind to January. I was engaged to Brianna, 26, for about a year. We dated for 3 years before that. Her maid of honor was Luna, 27, who'd been Brianna's friend since middle school. Important detail, Luna and I became close friends through wedding planning because Brianna always delegated the boring stuff to her. The ultimatum came on a Thursday night. Brianna had been getting progressively more jealous and controlling. First it was, why do you need female friends? Then it became, I don't like when you talk to women at work. The final straw for her was when my cousin Thea wished me happy birthday on social media with a photo from our childhood. Delete every female contact from your phone. Now, that's insane. Half of them are family. I don't care. Even family, no women except me and my mom. Your mom? Why would I have your mom in my phone but not my own sister? Because I trust my mom. I don't trust these other women. Delete them all, or the wedding is off. I stared at her for a solid minute. You want me to delete my sister, my mom, my cousins, my coworkers, everyone? Everyone. Right now, I'm not marrying someone who keeps backup options. Backup options? My 67-year-old Aunt Rita is a backup option? Don't be cute. Delete them or we're done. I pulled out my phone. Consider them deleted. I went through my contacts in front of her. Mom, deleted. Sister, deleted. Cousins, deleted. Female coworkers, deleted. Her friends that I had for group planning, deleted. Then I got to her name, deleted. What are you doing? You said delete all female contacts. You're female. She actually laughed. Obviously not me, you idiot. No, especially you. Someone this controlling and insecure isn't someone I want to marry. The look on her face? Priceless. She went from smug to confused to enraged in about 3 seconds. You're joking. Nope. Wedding's off. You can keep the deposit since you insisted on paying for everything to have control. She threw my phone at the wall. It survived. Good case. Then came the screaming about how I'd wasted 4 years of her life, how no one would ever love me like she did, how I'd die alone. Better alone than controlled. I left, went to my buddy Diego's place. Brianna blew up my phone with texts ranging from apologizing to threatening to cursing my entire bloodline. Here's where it gets interesting. Luna called me the next day. Hey, I heard what happened. Brianna's telling everyone you had a mental breakdown and called off the wedding because she caught you cheating. That's not even close to what happened. I know. She told me the truth first when she thought I'd take her side. Delete every woman from your life? That's psycho behavior. We talked for 2 hours. Luna revealed that Brianna had been like this in every relationship. Progressively more controlling until the guy broke. She'd stuck around hoping her friend would grow out of it. I'm done enabling her. What she did to you was abusive. A week later, Luna and I met for coffee to discuss canceling vendor contracts since Brianna was refusing to do anything except post cryptic quotes about betrayal on Instagram. 2 weeks later, we met again to make sure everything was handled. 3 weeks later, we were meeting just because we enjoyed talking. 4 weeks later, I realized I'd fallen for Luna. Hard. 5 weeks later, I told her. This is messy, she said. Incredibly messy, I agreed. She'll never forgive me. She'll never forgive either of us anyway. Luna kissed me. Then let's make it worth not being forgiven for. We kept everything quiet for 2 months. Only Diego and Luna's sister Camilla knew. We wanted to be sure this was real, not just trauma bonding or revenge. It was real. Really real. 3 months after the breakup, I proposed. Same ring. I'd gotten it back from Brianna after threatening to take her to small claims court for the $8,000. Luna said yes. Here's the kicker. We kept the same wedding date, same venue, same everything that was already booked and non-refundable. We just changed the bride's name on everything. Update. Y'all wanted to know about the invitation situation. Buckle up. We sent out new invitations 3 weeks before the wedding, changed the names, but kept everything else identical. Same date, time, venue, even the same font. We didn't send one to Brianna initially. We weren't monsters. But her mom, Eleanor, got one since she'd been nothing but kind to me during the relationship. Eleanor called Brianna immediately. Brianna drove straight to the venue. The venue coordinator called me. "Mr. Reeves, there's a woman here claiming there's been identity theft regarding your wedding." I put her on speaker. "Luna and I were having lunch. That's my ex-fiancé. We broke up. I'm marrying someone else now." "On the same date?" "We kept the bookings since they were non-refundable. She's demanding to see the contract. That's under my name. She has no legal right to it." We heard shrieking in the background. The coordinator said she needed to call security. 20 minutes later, Brianna was at my apartment building, buzzing every apartment claiming she was locked out. My neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, called me annoyed. I explained the situation. He told her through the intercom to leave, or he'd call the cops. She left, but not before keying what she thought was my car. It was my neighbor's. Ashley, the neighbor, had it on her dash cam and filed a police report. Then came the messages. "How dare you give her my wedding? My ring? You gave her my ring? At my vendors that I chose. You chose to end things. These are consequences." I ended things? I sent her the screenshot I'd wisely taken of her ultimatum texts from that night. "Delete every female or we're done. No exceptions. This is non-negotiable." That didn't mean we were broken up. "You literally said the wedding was off. I was teaching you a lesson. Lesson learned. I'm marrying someone who doesn't need to teach me lessons." She lost it. Called me 73 times in an hour. I counted. I blocked her. She used her work phone. Blocked. Her mom's phone. Blocked. But I texted Eleanor first, explaining why. Then Brianna did something unhinged. She made a Facebook event. "Funeral for Brianna's love life. Same day as the betrayal wedding. Scheduled for our wedding day at a bar near the venue." Luna's sister Camilla was invited. They weren't close, but Brianna was clearly trying to get info. Camilla accepted and screenshotted everything. Brianna was planning to have everyone wear black, crash our wedding during the vows, and object with evidence of Luna's betrayal. We hired security. Update 2, the week before the wedding, was eventful. Monday, Brianna called my work claiming I'd stolen $10 worth of her wedding deposits. My boss asked for proof. She had none because I'd paid for everything after she'd insisted on keeping finances separate until marriage. My boss told her to stop harassing his employees. Tuesday, she contacted every vendor trying to cancel everything. The baker called me confused. The florist was annoyed. The photographer straight up told her, "I don't care about your drama. The contract is with Mr. Reeves." Wednesday, this is where she went nuclear. She called Luna's parents. Luna's dad, Roberto, is old school traditional. Luna hadn't told them yet about us because she wanted to do it in person. They lived several hours away. Brianna told them Luna had seduced me while I was vulnerable and stolen me from her. She said Luna had been planning this for years. Roberto called Luna furious. Luna drove there immediately with me. We explained everything, including showing them Brianna's ultimatum texts and the timeline proving nothing happened until well after the breakup. Luna's mom, Carmen, was the one who spoke first. "So Brianna wanted you to delete your own mother from your phone?" "Yes." "And your sister?" "Yes." Roberto stood up, walked to his cabinet, and pulled out a bottle of tequila. "Anyone who asks a man to abandon his mother is no woman at all. Luna, you have my blessing." Plot twist. Roberto had never liked Brianna. She always talked about Luna like she was her servant, not her friend. Thursday, Brianna's funeral for her love life event got taken down by Facebook for targeted harassment after multiple people reported it. She made another one. It got removed too. Friday, the day before the wedding, Brianna made one last play. She showed up at the rehearsal dinner with a +1, my ex from college, Zoe, who'd cheated on me 6 years ago. "I thought you should know who you're marrying," Brianna announced loudly. "Luna contacted Zoe while we were together. She's been obsessed with you." Zoe looked confused. "What?" "She added me on Instagram last month asking for veggie dip recipes. After you two were already together." Brianna's face went red. "That's not, you said. You said you'd pay me $200 to show up and say Luna was obsessed with him. I need the money but not enough to lie." Zoe looked at me. "Congrats on the wedding. Sorry about this." She left. Brianna stood there, humiliated. Diego started slow clapping, then Roberto. then everyone. She ran out crying. Update 3. The wedding day. Oh my God. Despite hiring security, Brianna managed to cause chaos because of course she did. First, she called in a bomb threat to the venue. The police came, evacuated everyone, did their check, found nothing, and were not amused. They traced the call to a burner phone purchased with Brianna's credit card. She's now facing charges for a false report. While we were evacuated, standing in the parking lot in our wedding attire, Luna said, "We could just go to the courthouse and let her win? Never mind, let's get married out of spite." We did get married. But not before incident number 2. Brianna had recruited her brother Tanner to infiltrate as a photographer's assistant. He was caught by security trying to pour red paint on Luna's dress while it hung in the bridal suite. Security detained him. He immediately ratted out Brianna, showing texts where she promised him $500 to accidentally ruin the dress. Incident number 3 happened during the ceremony. Despite security, Brianna's mom Eleanor was still invited. We genuinely felt bad for her. Eleanor stood up during Speak Now or Forever Hold Your Peace, which we'd specifically told the officiant to skip, but she went rogue. "I need to say something." My heart stopped. Brianna is my daughter and I love her, but she's sick, mentally unwell. This obsession with control has destroyed every relationship she's had. I tried to get her help. She refused. "Luna, Ethan, I'm sorry for what she's put you through. You have my blessing." She sat down. You could hear a pin drop. We finished the ceremony. During the reception, Eleanor approached us with a box. "Brianna's childhood therapy reports. I thought you should know what you were dealing with. She's been diagnosed with several personality disorders but refuses treatment. I'm done enabling her." The reception was beautiful, until the cake cutting. Somehow Brianna had convinced the cake decorator, a different person from the baker, to write "betrayal" in tiny letters around the bottom tier. Luna spotted it right before we cut. "Are you kidding me?" We scraped it off and added extra flowers. Crisis averted. But the peak drama came at 10 p.m. Brianna showed up in a wedding dress, a full wedding dress. Claimed there'd been a mix-up, and she was the real bride. Security stopped her at the door. She caused such a scene that 3 cop cars showed up. The same cops from the bomb threat. "Ma'am, you again?" She was arrested for violating the restraining order we'd gotten earlier that week. Forgot to mention that. Got it after the rehearsal dinner incident. As they drove her away, she screamed, "This was supposed to be my day." Luna threw her bouquet at the cop car. "Now it's mine." Everyone cheered. Final update. It's been a month since the wedding. Time to wrap this saga up. Brianna was charged with false reporting, bomb threat, criminal mischief, keying Ashley's car, conspiracy to commit vandalism, the paint incident, violating a restraining order, harassment. She took a plea deal, probation, mandatory therapy, and 200 hours of community service. But she wasn't done being entitled. 2 weeks after the wedding, she sued us for emotional distress and theft of wedding services. She wanted $50,000. Her lawyer dropped her after seeing our evidence, her ultimatum texts, her admission that she wanted to teach me a lesson, the bomb threat recording, Tanner's testimony about the paint, 47 witnesses to her wedding day meltdown, someone counted. She tried to represent herself. The judge dismissed it in under 5 minutes. "Ma'am, you ended the relationship. You can't sue someone for moving on." "But he used my wedding plans. The contracts are in his name. They're his plans." "But I chose everything." "Then you should have put your name on the contracts." She started crying. The judge was unmoved. "Also, you're currently on probation for crimes committed against this couple. I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. Stay away from them." But the real final straw came last week. Brianna got fired from her job. Not for the criminal charges, but because she'd been using company time and resources to research legal precedents for suing an ex. Her boss found out when she accidentally sent a company-wide email meant for her mom that detailed her 5-year plan to destroy Ethan and Luna. The plan included getting pregnant by someone else and claiming it was mine, photoshopping messages to make Luna look like a homewrecker, hiring actors to claim they'd had affairs with me, starting a podcast called Stealing My Life Back about us substitute. She's now living with her parents. Eleanor sent us an apology card with a Starbucks gift card. For the therapy you'll probably need after dealing with my daughter." Tanner reached out to apologize properly. Turns out Brianna had been blackmailing him with embarrassing college photos. We convinced him to go to the police, add extortion to her charges. Last I heard through the grapevine, she's been banned from 3 wedding venues in town for calling and threatening them not to host homewreckers. She started a blog about surviving narcissistic abuse where she rewrites history. She got engaged to someone she met in court-ordered therapy. That's gonna go well. Her new fiancé already messaged me asking if the stories about her were true. I sent him screenshots of everything. He thanked me, but is still with her. That's his problem now. Luna and I are doing amazing. We're in couples therapy, preventatively, to make sure we started this right despite the chaos. The therapist said we have the healthiest communication she's seen in newlyweds. We're moving to a new city next month for Luna's job. Fresh start, no drama, no Brianna. Oh, and remember the photographer? He included a special album of just Brianna's meltdown moments. We're not proud enough to frame them, but we definitely kept them. To everyone saying this is fake, I have a permanent restraining order security footage and a wedding video featuring a bomb squad. Can't make this up. To everyone asking why I didn't see the red flags sooner, love is blind, but ultimatums are eye surgery. Eleanor still texts Luna occasionally. Apparently, Brianna is demanding her new fiancé delete all his female contacts. Some people never learn, but I did. I learned that when someone shows you who they are through controlling, manipulative behavior, believe them. Don't wait for it to get better. It won't. I also learned that sometimes the best person for you is standing right there, holding vendor contracts and telling you your ex is crazy while offering to help you fix everything she broke. Luna just read this over my shoulder and added, "I learned that recycling is good. Even engagement rings." We're happy. Genuinely, boringly, wonderfully happy. And Brianna? Well, she's blocked on everything, but Eleanor mentioned she's trying to sue the venue now for allowing the wrong bride. Good luck with that. Edit. Stop asking for the meltdown photos. We're not that petty. Okay, we are. But we're not trying to get sued again. Edit 2. To the 3 people who found Brianna's blog and shared it, please stop. Let her shout into the void. It's probably therapeutic. Edit 3. Her new fiancé dumped her. He messaged to thank me for the screenshots. Apparently she'd already demanded he cut off his sister. Dude ran. Smart man. When I asked her to wish me luck for my interview, she snorted, "Luck won't fix you. They'll see right through you like everyone else does." I just nodded, but when she found out who hired me, she nearly collapsed. For the last year, my life has been about one thing: rebuilding. I used to be a senior analyst at a big investment firm. I had the title, the salary, the whole package. And then the company restructured. My whole division was eliminated. I was laid off. It wasn't personal, just business, but it felt like a total failure. I spent a few months in a tailspin, trying to figure out my next move. During that time, I was supported by my girlfriend of 2 years, Catherine. We live in an apartment that I own, a place I bought back when my career was flying high. When I lost my job, we made an agreement. I would use my savings to cover the mortgage and our shared bills while I figured out my next venture. It was a temporary arrangement, a bridge to get me to the other side. I was grateful for her patience. I didn't realize she was keeping a detailed record of it, and that her patience had a price. Catherine works as a junior executive at a massive, prestigious wealth management firm called Sterling Thorne. It's an old money institution, the kind of place where your last name matters more than your last performance review. Her boss, a man named Alistair Croft, is a legend in the industry, and Catherine worships him. She is obsessed with the world of status, power, and perception. As the months went on and I was still working on building a small, independent consulting practice from our spare bedroom, her attitude started to change. Her support curdled into a kind of weary condescension. She'd make little comments about my project, as if it were a hobby like building model ships. She'd sigh dramatically when I was on a late-night call with a potential client. She started to see me not as a partner in a temporary rough patch, but as a charity case, a weight holding her back from the glamorous life she felt she deserved. I was trying. I was working 80-hour weeks, slowly building a client base. But it wasn't fast enough for her. The final straw, the moment the entire foundation of our relationship turned to dust, came yesterday morning. I had an interview. Not just any interview. It was for a newly created director of strategy position at a rival firm, a younger, more aggressive company that was making waves in the industry. It was a long shot, but it was the first real opportunity I'd had in a year to get back to the level I was at before. I was nervous, but hopeful. I put on my best suit. As I was adjusting my tie in the mirror, Catherine walked into the room, already dressed for her own important day at Sterling Thorne. "Wish me luck," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't even look at me. She was busy checking her reflection in the window. She let out a short, sharp, dismissive sound, a snort. "Luck won't fix you," she said, her voice dripping with a casual, devastating cruelty. "They'll see right through you, just like everyone else does." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just an insult, it was a summary judgment of my character, my ambition, my entire year of struggle. She wasn't just kicking me when I was down, she was grinding her heel on my neck. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, looking at her reflection in the glass. And in that moment, the man who loved her, the man who was grateful for her support, just ceased to exist. He was replaced by someone else. Someone colder, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous. I just nodded. A slow, deliberate nod of understanding. "You might be right," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. She finally turned to look at me, a smug little smirk on her face. She thought she had broken me. She thought her words had confirmed my own deepest fears. She had no idea she had just handed me a weapon. She had no idea that her casual cruelty was the fuel I needed to burn her entire world to the ground. Update 1. I walked out of that apartment a different man. The nervousness I felt about the interview was gone, replaced by a laser-like focus. Catherine's words, meant to shatter my confidence, had instead forged it into something unbreakable. She thought they would see right through me. Good. I was about to show her what was on the other side. The interview was at the headquarters of Northgate Capital, a firm that was the boogeyman in Catherine's world. They were the disruptors, the ones poaching clients and talent from old guard firms like Sterling Thorne. I wasn't just interviewed by a hiring manager. I was led into a large corner office. Sitting behind the desk was Marcus Thorne, the CEO. The Thorne from Sterling Thorne. He had left the family firm 10 years ago in a bitter dispute with his older brother and had built Northgate into its biggest rival. He was a shark, a legend, and he did not suffer fools. He had my resume in his hand, but he didn't look at it. He just looked at me. "So," he said, his voice a low growl, "you used to be one of them. Why do you want to be one of us?" The old me would have given a polished corporate answer. The new me told the truth. I told him about being laid off, about the brutal reality of a changing industry. I told him about my year in the wilderness, building my own small firm, learning the business from the ground up, not from the top down. I didn't talk about my successes, I talked about my failures and what I had learned from them. And then I laid out my vision. I didn't just answer his questions. I presented a full-scale, unsolicited strategic analysis of Northgate's position in the market, complete with a detailed plan to exploit the weaknesses of Sterling Thorne. I had been working on this for months as part of my consulting work. It was my masterpiece. For an hour, I held the attention of one of the most powerful men in finance. When I was finished, he was silent for a long moment. He just stared at me, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "They didn't see what they had, did they?" he said. "It wasn't a question. The director position is yours if you want it, but I have a better idea." He offered me a job that wasn't on the table. A new role, created just for me, Vice President of Special Projects. I would report directly to him. My only job would be to identify and attack the vulnerabilities of his competition. My primary target, Sterling Thorne. I accepted on the spot, but I had one condition. I told him I needed 2 weeks of complete discretion. I explained that my personal situation was complicated, and I needed time to extricate myself before my new role was announced. He agreed, intrigued by the request. I walked out of that building with a job that was more than a job. It was a weapon, and I was going to aim it right at the heart of Catherine's world. I went home and played the part of the defeated man. I told Catherine the interview had been a disaster. I told her she had been right. They had seen right through me. The change in her was immediate. The condescension was replaced by a cloying, suffocating pity. She patted my shoulder and told me not to worry, that my little consulting business was cute and that she would be happy to support me until I found my footing. She was so high on her own perceived superiority that she was completely blind. For the next 2 weeks, I was a ghost. I spent my days at a rented office space, working directly with Marcus Thorne and his team, preparing for my official start. We were planning a major move, a corporate raid on Sterling Thorne's most profitable division. At night, I would go home and play the part of the beaten man, listening to Catherine talk about her brilliant boss, Alistair Croft, and the upcoming annual Sterling Thorne Foundation Gala, the most important event of her year. She made it very clear that I was not invited to the gala. "It's a very high-level event, babe," she had said, not even looking at me. "It's for the major players. You would just feel out of place." "I understand," I had said, my voice full of fake humility. The day before the gala, I made my final moves. I went to my bank and moved the majority of my savings, including the substantial signing bonus from Northgate, into a new private account. I then met with a real estate lawyer. I had him draft a formal notice, giving Catherine 30 days to vacate my apartment. I also had him draw up a detailed invoice for her share of the household expenses for the past year, which she had conveniently forgotten to pay since I was laid off. The night of the gala, Catherine was a whirlwind of excitement. She spent hours getting ready. As she was about to leave, she looked at me, sitting on the couch in my sweatpants, and gave me a look of profound pity. "Don't wait up," she said. "It's going to be a late night of networking." "Have fun," I said, smiling up at her. "Make some good connections." She walked out the door, completely unaware that the biggest connection of the night was going to be the one that severed her from my life. Permanently. Update 2. The Sterling Thorne Foundation Gala was held at a grand old museum, the kind of place with marble floors and ceilings so high they get their own weather. Catherine had been talking about this night for months. It was her chance to shine, to network with the titans of her industry, and most importantly, to impress her boss, Alistair Croft. She arrived, I'm told, looking like $1,000,000. She was working the room, laughing with senior partners, and making sure she was seen by all the right people. She was in her element. The main event of the evening was a speech by Alistair Croft, followed by a major announcement about the future of the firm. He took the stage to thunderous applause. He spoke for 20 minutes about tradition, about legacy, about the strength of Sterling Thorne. And then he came to the big announcement. "As we look to the future," he said, his voice booming through the hall, "we know that our greatest strength is our people, and it is my distinct pleasure to announce the promotion of our newest partner." Catherine was practically vibrating. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She was sure the promotion was hers. But Alistair didn't say her name. He announced the promotion of a colleague of hers, a man she considered her inferior. I heard from a friend who was there that the look on her face was a mixture of shock and fury. But the night was still young. Alistair wasn't finished. "And now," he said, "it is my honor to introduce a very special guest, a man who represents the future of our industry, a true visionary. Please welcome the CEO of Northgate Capital, Mr. Marcus Thorne." A wave of gasps went through the room. Marcus Thorne, their biggest rival, was here, at their gala. He walked onto the stage, shook Alistair's hand, and took the microphone. He was charming, he was ruthless, and he held the entire room in the palm of his hand. He spoke about innovation, about disruption, about the need for new blood and new ideas. "The old ways of doing business are dying," he said, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "And at Northgate, we are not just adapting to the future. We are building it. And to lead that charge, to spearhead our most aggressive expansion yet, I have brought on a man with the sharpest strategic mind I have ever encountered. A man your own industry cast aside and whom we were more than happy to pick up." He paused, letting the tension build. Catherine was standing in the crowd, completely bewildered. "Please join me in welcoming the new Vice President of Special Projects at Northgate Capital," Marcus Thorne declared, "Mr. David Miller." And then I walked out onto the stage. I was wearing a custom-tailored suit that had cost more than her car. I looked confident, I looked powerful, and I looked like I belonged there more than anyone in that room. I saw her. She was standing about 30 feet from the stage. Her face was completely white. Her mouth was hanging open. She looked like she had seen a ghost. The woman who had told me, just 2 weeks ago, that luck wouldn't fix me, was now watching me be introduced as the right-hand man to her industry's most feared and respected leader. I shook Marcus Thorne's hand, took the microphone, and looked out at the sea of stunned faces. I didn't even glance at Catherine. She was no longer a factor in my equation. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice calm and clear. "It's an honor to be here. I have to say, it's good to be back. I look forward to showing all of you what I'm capable of." The room was in an uproar. People were whispering, pointing. Catherine's colleagues were all staring at her, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. Her carefully constructed world of lies and condescension had just been publicly and spectacularly demolished. She didn't just look foolish, she looked like a liability. And in her world, there is no greater sin. Final update. The rest of the gala was a blur of handshakes and congratulations. I was surrounded by the very people Catherine had been so desperate to impress. They weren't just being polite, they were actively trying to network with me. I was no longer the failed boyfriend. I was the new power player in town. Catherine tried to approach me once. She pushed through the crowd, her face a mess of tears and rage. "David, we need to talk," she hissed. I just looked at her, my face a mask of polite confusion. "I'm sorry," I said, as if I didn't recognize her. "Have we met?" One of Marcus Thorne's security guys gently but firmly escorted her away. That was the last time I spoke to her in person. When she finally got home to the apartment in the early hours of the morning, she found the locks had been changed. Taped to the door was the 30-day eviction notice and the invoice for the money she owed me. The next few weeks were a slow, satisfying demolition of her professional life. The story of what had happened at the gala spread through the financial world like a wildfire. She became a joke. The woman who was so arrogant and blind that she had no idea her unambitious boyfriend was about to become her biggest professional threat. Her boss, Alistair Croft, was furious, not at me, but at her. She had made him and the entire firm look foolish. She was a walking, talking symbol of Sterling Thorne's inability to recognize and retain talent. She was put on a meaningless, dead-end project and effectively sidelined. She tried to fight the eviction, of course. Her lawyer sent a series of threatening letters. My lawyer sent back a single devastating response. It included a copy of the deed to the apartment, a detailed accounting of her financial arrears, and a sworn affidavit from a colleague of hers who had overheard her making disparaging remarks about me at work. The letters stopped. The best part of my revenge, however, was professional. My first project at Northgate was to lead a hostile takeover of a smaller firm that Sterling Thorne had been trying to acquire for months. I used my insider knowledge of their slow, bureaucratic process to outmaneuver them at every turn. We closed the deal in 6 weeks. It was a massive, public victory for Northgate and a humiliating defeat for Sterling Thorne. Alistair Croft's division, the one Catherine worked in, was directly responsible for the failure. I heard through a former colleague that Alistair called Catherine into his office the day after the deal was announced. He didn't yell. He just calmly explained that her presence at the firm was a constant and painful reminder of their biggest strategic failure in a decade. He told her that her judgment was fundamentally flawed and that there was no future for her at Sterling Thorne. She was fired. I saw her once, a few months later. I was leaving a meeting and she was walking down the street carrying a box of what looked like office supplies. She had lost the polished, confident look she always wore. She just looked tired and defeated. She saw me, and her eyes filled with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I just nodded politely and got into the town car that was waiting for me. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it to be honest. She had told me, with her words and her actions, that she thought I was worthless. I just decided to show her and the rest of the world what my actual value was. She built her life on a foundation of perception and status. I just provided a reality check. And reality, as it turns out, can be a very brutal, very satisfying thing.
She said, You don't need to know what happens on a girl's trip. That's why you're blocked until I'm home." I didn't react, but when she came back expecting me at the airport, she found out who was really waiting for her. I am a private investigator. It is a job that changes you. You learn to see the world in layers of truth and deception. You learn to read people not by what they say, but by what they do, and more importantly, by what they try to hide. My girlfriend of 3 years, Jessica, always said my job made me too cynical. The truth is, my job did not make me cynical enough. Our relationship was, I thought, my one safe harbor from the world I operate in. It was the one place I did not have to look for the angle, the lie, the hidden motive. We were partners. We lived in my house, a place I had bought and paid for with a decade of long nights and risky assignments. We had shared goals, a shared life. I trusted her. In my line of work, trust is the highest currency, and I had given her all of it. The problem started, as it often does, with a trip, a 5-day girls' trip to Las Vegas with her 3 best friends. There was Lauren, the ringleader, twice divorced and perpetually on the hunt. There was Becca, the follower, who mirrored Lauren's personality. And there was Chloe, who was quiet but always seemed to be watching and calculating. I did not like them. They were loud, superficial, and treated Jessica like their prized possession, constantly reminding her of the wild days she had before she met a boring stable guy like me. A few days before the trip, I was helping Jessica pack. I asked for her flight details and the name of the hotel just so I would have it in case of an emergency. She turned to me, a strange, hard look in her eyes. "You do not need to know that," she said. I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I just want to know where you are." She crossed her arms and her voice took on a sharp, condescending tone. "It is a girls' trip, Mark. The whole point is to get away from everything, including you. You do not need to know what happens on a girls' muff that trip. That is why you are blocked until I am home." I just stared at her. Blocked? She was not. Just asking for privacy. She was declaring a 5-day blackout. She was drawing a line between her life and our life. I did not react. I did not yell. I did not argue. In my profession, when someone shows you a wall, you do not try to break it down. You find a way around it. My mind, trained to see every angle, immediately went into professional mode. The boyfriend was gone. The investigator had just clocked in. "Okay," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I understand. Have a great time." Her confident, defiant expression faltered for a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion. She had expected a fight. She had wanted one. A fight would have made her feel justified. My easy agreement left her with nothing to push against. She left the next morning. I drove her to the airport. She was cheerful, excited, already in vacation mode. As she got out of the car, she leaned in to kiss me. "Do not miss me too much," she said with a wink. "I will call you when I land to let you know I am unblocking you." "I will not," I said. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I watched her walk into the terminal, dragging her suitcase behind her. Then I drove away. I did not go home. I went to my office. The investigation had already begun. She thought she was going into a 5-day blackout. She had no idea I was about to flood her world with light. She was expecting me to be waiting for her at the airport when she got back. She was right in a way. I would not be there, but she was about to find out who was really waiting for her. Update 1. It has been 1 week since Jessica left for her girls' trip. For her, it has been a week of parties, pictures, and secrets. For me, it has been a week of quiet, methodical work. The kind of work I am very, very good at. The first thing I did when I got to my office was simple. I ran the license plate of the car that had picked up her 3 friends that morning. Lauren had posted a picture of the 4 of them in front of her house, ready to go. The car, in the background, was a high-end SUV. The plate came back registered to a man named Adam Cole. A quick search revealed that Adam Cole was a senior partner at a major investment firm in the city. He was also married with 2 young children. Interesting. Jessica had told me they were flying on a budget airline. A little digging into flight manifests for Las Vegas that day told a different story. There were no tickets under her name or her friends' names on any commercial flight, but there was a private jet owned by Adam Cole's firm that had filed a flight plan from our city to Las Vegas that morning. The passenger list was not public, but I did not need it to be. The picture was already becoming clear. The blocking was a gift. It was not an obstacle. It was a confirmation of deception. She thought it would keep me in the dark. Instead, it gave me the freedom to operate without having to maintain the facade of the trusting boyfriend. Her friends, however, were not as careful. They were arrogant. Becca, the follower, had a public social media profile. She was a fountain of information. Throughout the week, she posted a steady stream of pictures and videos. They were all carefully framed to look like a girls' trip. Pictures of the 4 of them with cocktails by the pool. A video of them dancing at a nightclub. A selfie in front of a famous casino. But amateurs always make mistakes. In the reflection of Becca's sunglasses in one selfie, I could see the clear outline of a man sitting across from them at a cabana. In the background of a video from the nightclub, I saw Lauren laughing and leaning intimately into a man who was definitely not her ex-husband. The biggest mistake was a photo Chloe posted. It was a group shot of the 4 of them at a fancy dinner. In the background on the wall was a distinctive piece of art, a large abstract painting. A reverse image search took me less than 5 minutes. The painting was a well-known piece that hung in the private dining room of one of the most exclusive high-roller suites in the Bellagio. A suite that is not available to the general public. A suite that is reserved for the casino's biggest clients. I made a few calls. I have contacts in Las Vegas, people who owe me favors. A friend who works in casino security confirmed it for me. The suite was registered to Adam Cole. He was there. For the week, hosting a group of clients, and his guests included 4 women. My girlfriend Jessica was one of them. This was not a girls' trip. It was a paid party. She was not on vacation with her friends. She was an accessory for a wealthy married man and his business associates. The entire trip, the secrecy, the blocking, it was all a cover for a life she was living that I had no part in. The final piece of the puzzle was the most painful. In one of Becca's videos, I saw Jessica in the background. She was laughing, holding a drink, and she was talking to a man. I could not see his face clearly, but there was something familiar about him. I isolated the audio, cleaned it up, and ran it through a voice analysis program. It was a long shot, but I had to know. The program matched the voice pattern to a sample from my own database. The voice belonged to a man named Scott, her ex-fiancé. The man she had told me she despised. The man she said had cheated on her and broken her heart. He was one of Adam Cole's clients. The entire thing was a lie. A complex, layered, and deeply insulting lie. She had not just gone on a trip without me. She had gone on a trip to be with another man funded by a different man, all while pretending to be with her friends. My course of action was clear. This was not a situation that required a conversation. It required a consequence, a public, undeniable, and life-altering consequence. I started with Adam Cole's wife, Catherine. I ran a background check on her. She was a respected pediatrician, a mother, a woman who seemed to have no idea what her husband was doing on his business trips. I did not contact her directly. That was not my place. But I compiled a file, a neat digital package containing the flight plan of the private jet, the hotel suite registration, and the photos from social media, including the ones showing her husband with Lauren. I sent the file to a reputable divorce attorney in her city, along with an anonymous note. You might want to show this to your client, Catherine Cole. It seems her husband's business trips are more eventful than she knows. Next, I dealt with Scott, the ex-fiancé. He was a real estate developer. He was also, according to public records, in the middle of a messy business dispute with his former partners. I have a friend who is an investigative journalist. I sent him an anonymous tip about a real estate developer who funds his lavish lifestyle and his trips to Las Vegas with other people's money. I included Scott's name and some details about his business dealings that were not hard to find if you knew where to look. Finally, I prepared for Jessica's return. She was due to land on Sunday afternoon. She had texted me from a friend's phone a few days ago. A brief, cheerful message. Having so much fun. Can't wait to see you. Pick me up at 3 p.m. on Sunday. I will unblock you when I am on the plane. I replied with a simple, okay. She was expecting me. She was expecting a hug, a kiss, and a quiet drive home where she would tell me a series of carefully edited stories about her trip. She had no idea what was actually waiting for her. I found the one person who had more of a right to be at that airport than I did. It took me 2 days of solid work, but I found her. The live-in girlfriend of Scott, the ex-fiancé. Her name is Emily. She is a school teacher, and she had no idea her boyfriend was in Las Vegas. He had told her he was at a wellness retreat in Arizona with no cell service. I called her. It was the hardest call I have ever had to make. I told her who I was, and I told her what I had found. I sent her the evidence, the audio file, the pictures, the hotel information. She was silent for a long time. Then she started to cry, but after the tears came the anger, a cold, hard anger that matched my own. I told her about Jessica's flight. I told her what time she was landing, and I made her a proposition. She is expecting me to be there, I said, but I think you are the one she should see first. Emily agreed without hesitation. So, the stage is set. The actors are in place. Jessica's flight is scheduled to land in 24 hours. She is expecting a welcome, home party. She has no idea she's about to walk into a funeral. Her own. Update 2. The events of the past few days have been more chaotic and more satisfying than I could have possibly scripted. The airport was not just a confrontation. It was a detonation. And I was the one holding the trigger miles away. I was not at the airport on Sunday. I was at home monitoring the situation through a live feed from a private security contractor I had hired. He was posing as a limo driver holding a sign with a different name on it, his phone camera streaming directly to my laptop. Jessica's flight landed on time. I watched as she and her 3 friends walked out of the gate and into the baggage claim area. They were tanned, laughing, and loaded down with shopping bags. Jessica was on her phone, a big smile on her face. She was probably texting me, telling me she was there, expecting me to be waiting at the curb. As they came through the main doors into the arrivals hall, I saw Emily. She was standing there, calm and composed, holding a large, professionally printed poster board. On the board was a crystal-clear, high-resolution photo I had managed to acquire for my casino contact. It was a picture of Jessica and Scott sitting together at a blackjack table in the high roller lounge, his arm draped possessively around her. Jessica saw Emily first. Her smile froze. Her face went pale. She stopped dead in her tracks. Her friends, still chattering away, bumped into her. They followed her gaze to Emily, then to the poster she was holding. The laughter died. Emily did not yell. She did not scream. She just stood there, letting the picture do the talking. The arrivals hall of a major airport is a busy place, but a small bubble of silence and intense drama formed around them. People were stopping, staring, pulling out their phones. Jessica tried to recover. She started to walk away, pretending she did not know Emily. But Emily was prepared. She took a step forward, her voice clear and steady, loud enough for everyone around them to hear. Scott sends his apologies. Emily said, "He could not be here to welcome you home himself. He's a little busy explaining this picture to me." Jessica's friends looked at her, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning horror. They had been part of the lie, and they were now caught in the blast radius. At that exact moment, a man in a crisp suit stepped forward. He was a process server I had hired. He walked directly up to Jessica. "Jessica Miller?" he asked, his voice professional and loud. She just nodded, completely stunned. "You have been served," he said, handing her a thick legal envelope. Inside that envelope was a formal eviction notice. She had 30 days to remove her belongings from my property. Also, inside was a restraining order preventing her from contacting me or coming within 500 ft of my house or my place of business. The combination of the public humiliation and the legal documents was too much. Jessica just crumpled. She dropped her bags, covered her face with her hands, and started to sob. Her friends did not rush to comfort her. They grabbed their own bags and scattered, disappearing into the crowd like rats from a sinking ship. They wanted no part of the mess they had helped create. My security contractor's camera captured the whole thing. The beautiful, confident woman who had blocked me from her life just 5 days earlier was now sitting on the floor of an airport, surrounded by her expensive shopping bags, completely and utterly alone. The fallout since then has been swift and comprehensive. Adam Cole's wife, Catherine, did not waste any time. The day after I sent her lawyer the file, she filed for divorce. She also, I am told, liquidated a significant portion of their joint assets and put the money into a trust for her children, a move her prenuptial agreement allowed her to do in cases of infidelity. Adam is facing a messy, expensive, and very public divorce. His firm is also reportedly reviewing his position as the scandal is not a good look for their family-oriented image. Lauren, the ringleader of the trip, has been named in the divorce proceedings. Scott, the ex-fiancé, is also in a world of trouble. The journalist I tipped off ran a story about his shady business dealings. His partners are suing him, and his reputation is in tatters. Emily has left him and is with my help preparing her own legal action against him for financial damages. And Jessica. Her life is a smoking crater. She has no boyfriend, no home, and her friends have abandoned her. She had to call her parents to come and get her from the airport. I can only imagine that conversation. She is now living in their spare bedroom, a 30-year-old woman whose entire life has been reset to zero. She has tried to contact me, of course. She's used burner phones, new email accounts, everything. I have not responded. My lawyer has sent her a cease and desist letter reminding her of the restraining order. Her friends have also tried to reach out, each with their own pathetic attempt at damage control. They have all claimed they had no idea what was really going on, that Jessica had lied to them. I have not responded to them either. They are irrelevant. I spent the week after her return systematically erasing her from my life. Her belongings were packed by a professional moving company and delivered to her parents' address. I changed my phone number. I have scrubbed my social media. To her and to the world she inhabits, I have become a ghost. She thought she was playing a game. She thought she could have it all, the stability I provided and the thrill of a secret life. She did not understand that in my world there are no games. There are only facts, evidence, and consequences. She gave me a 5-day blackout. I gave her a lifetime of it. Final update. It has been 6 months since the day of the airport greeting. The dust has not just settled, it has been swept away, leaving behind a clean slate. I am writing this final update not to gloat, but to close the book on this chapter of my life and to detail the final quiet consequences of a series of very loud mistakes. My life has moved on in a way I did not expect. After the initial satisfaction of the revenge wore off, I was left with a sense of emptiness. I had won, but the victory felt hollow. I had spent so much of my life looking for the deception in others that I had forgotten how to look for the good. The person who helped me change that was Emily, Scott's ex-girlfriend. We stayed in touch after the airport incident. We were two people who had been betrayed by the same lie, and we found a strange sort of comfort in that shared experience. We started having coffee, then dinner. We talked about everything except what had happened. We talked about our jobs, our families, our dreams. I discovered a woman who was kind, funny, and incredibly strong. We are dating now. It is slow, it is careful, And it is built on a foundation of absolute honesty. It is the realest thing in my life. The lives of the people who caused so much chaos, however, have found their own fitting conclusions. Adam Cole's divorce was finalized. It was brutal. Catherine, armed with the evidence I provided, took him for everything she was legally entitled to. He lost his house, a significant portion of his fortune, and his position at the investment firm. His reputation is destroyed. Lauren, who was named in the divorce, has become a social outcast. The wealthy men she used to associate with now see her as a liability. Scott's legal troubles have only deepened. The article about his business practices triggered an official investigation. He is facing multiple lawsuits and the potential for criminal charges. He has lost everything. And Jessica, her story is the quietest and, in some ways, the saddest. After months of living with her parents, she finally got a new job and moved into a small apartment. She is starting over, but she is doing it alone. Her friends never came back. Her reputation never recovered. I received one final communication from her about 2 months ago. It was a letter forwarded to me by my lawyer. It was a long, handwritten apology. She did not make excuses. She did not ask for a second chance. She just owned it. She wrote that the public humiliation at the airport was the worst day of her life. But it was also the day she finally saw herself for who she was, a person who valued the attention of others more than the love of one. She wrote that she was in therapy and that she hoped one day to become someone she could be proud of. She ended the letter by saying that she did not expect forgiveness, but that she was truly sorry for the pain she had caused me. I read the letter, and for the first time I did not feel anger or satisfaction. I just felt a sense of closure. I believe her apology was genuine. But I also believe that some things once broken cannot be put back together. My revenge was not just about exposing a lie. It was about forcing a group of people who lived in a world of illusion to face a moment of undeniable truth. The airport was a stage, and on that stage they were all forced to take off their masks. What was left was not pretty. I do not think about them anymore. My life is full. I have a partner I trust, a business I am proud of, and a sense of peace I have not felt in years. I still see the world in layers, but now I am better at seeing the good along with the bad. Jessica thought she could block me out for 5 days. She did not realize that in doing so, she was giving me the space to build a new firewall, one that would protect my life from her kind of chaos forever. And behind that wall, everything is quiet. Everything is safe.
So James came home from his bachelor party last Saturday night absolutely hammered and starts going off about how his boys think I'm crazy and controlling. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And this fool starts laughing and tells me they took a vote on whether he should dump me before the wedding. A vote. Like I'm some kind of referendum on their stupid group chat. Apparently the whole thing started because his friend Tommy was asking why Victoria wasn't invited to our wedding. You know, Victoria, his ex-girlfriend from college who he dated for 3 years and who still comments heart eye emojis on every single one of his Instagram posts. Yeah, that Victoria. The same one who shows up to every group event even though they broke up 2 years ago and acts like she's still part of their little friend circle. James starts defending me at first, saying it's normal that fiancés don't invite their partner's exes to their wedding. But then Tommy goes off about how Victoria is practically family to their group and how I'm being unreasonable. And instead of shutting that down, James apparently just sat there while they all started discussing my personality flaws like I'm some kind of project they need to fix. By the time they were 3 breweries deep, they were full-on debating whether James should call off the wedding because I'm too jealous and insecure. Tommy even pulled up some article on his phone about red flags in relationships and started reading it out loud, pointing out how I supposedly fit half the criteria. The other guys were chiming in with their expert relationship advice, talking about how their girlfriends would never act like this and how I need to learn to be more chill. And my fiancé, the man I'm supposed to marry in 6 weeks, just let them talk about me like that. He didn't defend me, didn't tell them to back off, didn't even leave. He sat there drinking beer and nodding along while his friends dissected our relationship like some kind of group therapy session. The vote was apparently close too. 4 guys said he should dump me, 3 said he should keep me, but make me apologize to Victoria first. And only 2 said I had a right to not invite her. Only 2 out of 9 guys thought I was being reasonable for not wanting my fiancé's ex at our wedding. When James told me all this, he was laughing like it was some hilarious joke. Like the fact that his best friends think he should leave me is just boys being boys. He kept saying I should take it as a compliment that they care about him enough to give him honest advice, and that maybe I should consider their perspective because they know him better than anyone. I asked him point blank what he told them when they were voting, and he got all defensive, saying he tried to explain my side, but that I needed to understand how it looks from the outside. How it looks. Like I have some kind of obligation to roll out the red carpet for his ex-girlfriend at my own wedding? The worst part is that this isn't even the first time Victoria has caused drama in our relationship. She constantly texts him about random stuff. Oh, I saw this meme that reminded me of you. Oh, remember that time we went to that restaurant? Oh, I'm having car trouble, do you know a good mechanic? And every time I bring it up, James acts like I'm being paranoid and jealous. He says she's just being friendly and that I need to trust him. But here's the thing. I do trust him. I don't trust her. And I definitely don't trust the fact that she's always finding excuses to stay connected to him. When we got engaged, she was one of the first people to comment on our announcement post, talking about how she's so happy for us and can't wait to celebrate. The audacity was incredible. So now I'm supposed to be okay with the fact that his entire friend group thinks I'm some kind of controlling witch who doesn't deserve him? And that my own fiancé sat there and let them vote on our relationship like it's some kind of democracy? I spent all of Sunday trying to process this, and honestly, I keep going back and forth between being hurt and being absolutely furious. Part of me wants to call off the wedding myself just to see the look on their faces when their precious Victoria doesn't get her invitation anyway. But the bigger part of me is wondering what else James lets his friends say about me when I'm not around. We're supposed to meet with our wedding planner tomorrow to finalize the seating chart, and I have no idea how I'm supposed to sit there and act like everything is normal when I know his friends think he should dump me. The wedding is in 6 weeks, and we've already paid for everything. The venue, the catering, my dress, all of it. I haven't told anyone about this yet because honestly, I'm embarrassed. How do you explain to your family and friends that your fiancé's bachelor party turned into a referendum on whether you're worth marrying? My sister Carly is already suspicious because she thinks James is too close to his friend group anyway, and if I tell her about this, she's going to lose her mind. The thing is, I know I'm not being unreasonable about Victoria. Every single one of my married friends has told me that not inviting exes is completely normal and expected. My cousin didn't invite her husband's ex, my coworker didn't invite her husband's ex, even my mom didn't invite any of my dad's exes to their wedding. It's not jealousy, it's just basic common sense and respect for boundaries. But James keeps making me feel like I'm the crazy one. Like I'm supposed to be this cool girl who's totally fine with his ex being at our wedding, texting him whenever she wants, and inserting herself into every aspect of our relationship. And now his friends are backing him up, making me feel like there's something wrong with me for having normal boundaries. I keep thinking about what they must have said about me that James didn't repeat. If he was willing to tell me about the vote, what else did they say that he's keeping to himself? Did they talk about how I look? How I act around them? Did they bring up other things I've done that they think are red flags? The whole thing has me questioning everything about our relationship. If James really thought I was being unreasonable, why didn't he just talk to me about it privately instead of letting his friends debate it at his bachelor party? And if he thinks his friends are right, why is he still planning to marry me? I need advice because I have no idea how to handle this. Do I confront his friends directly? Do I demand that James defend me to them? Do I just pretend this never happened and hope it doesn't come up again? Or do I seriously consider whether I want to marry someone who lets his friends vote on whether I'm good enough for him? The wedding is so close and everything is planned, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm making a huge mistake. How am I supposed to walk down that aisle knowing that half his groomsmen think he should dump me instead? First update. First off, thank you to everyone who told me I wasn't being crazy about the Victoria thing. Reading all your responses made me realize just how messed up this whole situation really is. The comment about how his friends basically held a tribunal about my worthiness really hit home. That's exactly what this was. So we had our appointment with the wedding planner at this little office in the shopping center near our apartment. James was acting like everything was totally normal, talking about centerpieces and whether we wanted the fish or chicken option. I'm sitting there trying to focus, but all I can think about is how his groomsmen think he should dump me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and told our planner, Rachel, that we needed a few minutes alone. The second she left the room, I started going off about how I couldn't stop thinking about what he told me. James immediately started saying I was blowing everything out of proportion, that guys talk trash when they're drinking and I shouldn't take it so seriously. But here's where it gets really messed up. When I pressed him for more details about what exactly they said about me, he let slip that Tommy had been talking about this for months. Apparently, every time we hang out with the group, Tommy makes comments to the other guys about how I'm too uptight, or how James was more fun before he got with me, and James has just been sitting there listening to this crap for months without ever telling me or shutting it down. I asked him why the hell he didn't tell me that his best friend has been trashing me behind my back, and James got mad at me for making him feel like he had to choose between his friends and his fiancé. He started going on about how Tommy has been his friend since college, and how he can't just cut him off because Tommy doesn't love everything about me. The conversation got really heated, and James finally admitted that maybe some of what Tommy says isn't totally wrong. He said he's noticed that I do get jealous when Victoria comes up, and that maybe I could try being more understanding about their friendship. He actually had the nerve to suggest that I should reach out to Victoria myself and try to build a relationship with her so his friends would see that I'm not the controlling person they think I am. I literally could not believe what I was hearing. My own fiancé was sitting there telling me that maybe his friends have a point about me being jealous and controlling. After 3 years together, after proposing to me, after planning this whole wedding, he's suddenly questioning whether their concerns are valid. I told him that if he thought his friends were right about me, then maybe we shouldn't be getting married at all. And instead of immediately saying no, of course not, I love you, he got quiet for a really long time, like he was actually considering it. Then he said that he loves me, but he's worried about how his friends feel about our relationship, because these are the people who are going to be in our lives forever. Our wedding planner knocked on the door asking if everything was okay because we'd been in there for like 30 minutes, and James just smiled and said we were fine and asked if we could reschedule. The whole ride home, we didn't say a word to each other, and I could tell he was thinking about everything his friends had said. That night when we got home, James tried to smooth things over by saying he didn't mean to make me feel bad, but then he brought up the Victoria thing again. He said that maybe if I just gave her a chance and tried to be friends with her, it would show his friends that I'm not threatened by her and that I trust him. He kept saying that she's really nice once you get to know her and that she's not trying to cause problems between us. But then, and this is the part that really got to me, he admitted that Victoria had been asking him about our wedding plans. Not just casual questions, but detailed stuff like where we're having it, and when, and whether she might get an invitation after all. James told her that I was handling the guest list and that it probably wasn't going to work out, but he said it in this apologetic way like he was sorry she couldn't come. I asked him why Victoria would think she might get invited in the first place, and he got all uncomfortable and said that maybe he hadn't been clear enough with her about boundaries. Apparently he's been talking to her about our wedding planning and our relationship issues, including the fact that I don't want her there. So she knows that I'm the reason she's not invited, and she's been trying to work around me by talking to James directly about it. This whole time I thought Victoria was just being inappropriate by staying in touch with my fiancé, but it turns out James has been telling her personal stuff about our relationship and our wedding plans. He's been making me out to be the bad guy who won't let her come to the wedding, instead of just telling her that it's not appropriate for an ex to be there. When I confronted him about this, James said he was just trying to be honest with her because she's been part of his friend group for so long. He said it would be weird to suddenly start being secretive about his life when she asks him questions. But I pointed out that there's a difference between being secretive and sharing intimate details about our relationship and our wedding with his ex-girlfriend. The fight continued the next day when James suggested we should all meet up at the sports bar near his office. Him, me, Victoria, and maybe a couple of the other friends, so that I could see for myself that Victoria isn't trying to cause trouble. He thought if I just spent some time with her, I'd realize she's harmless and his friends would see that I'm not actually jealous or controlling. I told him absolutely not. That I wasn't going to put myself in some weird situation where I have to prove to his ex-girlfriend and his friends that I'm cool enough to deserve him. The fact that he even suggested it showed me how completely backwards his thinking is about this whole situation. But James kept pushing, saying that if I really trusted him, then I should be willing to spend time with Victoria. He said my refusal to even meet with her was just proving his friend's point about me being insecure and controlling. He made it sound like the mature, confident thing to do would be to sit down with his ex and hash things out like adults. I tried to explain to him that this wasn't about trust or insecurity, it was about appropriate boundaries in our relationship. But he kept coming back to what his friends think and how it looks to other people. He said that everyone in their friend group is confused about why I won't even try to get along with Victoria, and that it's creating tension for everyone. The whole conversation made me realize that James cares more about what his friends think than about how I feel. He's more worried about looking like the guy whose fiancé won't let him be friends with his ex than he is about the fact that his friends think he should dump me. Thursday afternoon, I was at Target picking up some stuff for work when I ran into Mila, one of James's co-workers from his job. We've met a few times at company happy hours and she's always been really friendly. She was in the pharmacy section grabbing some allergy medicine and we ended up talking while we waited in line. She mentioned that she'd heard about our wedding coming up and how exciting it must be, but then she got this weird look on her face and asked if everything was okay. When I asked what she meant, she said that James had seemed really stressed lately and that he'd been talking to some of the guys at work about relationship stuff. My stomach dropped because I realized James has been discussing our problems at work too, not just with his friend group. Mila said she didn't want to get involved, but that she'd overheard James talking to Earl about whether it's normal for fiancés to be jealous of their partner's female friends. She said it seemed like he was asking for advice about how to handle a situation with someone who was being unreasonable about boundaries. I couldn't believe he was making me sound like the problem to his coworkers too. Mila could tell I was upset and said she probably shouldn't have said anything, but then she mentioned that Earl had told James that some women just can't handle their partner having female friends, and that maybe James needed to be firmer about setting expectations. So now I'm finding out that not only have his college friends been discussing whether he should dump me, but his coworkers think I'm some kind of jealous girlfriend who can't handle him having female friends. James has been painting this picture of me as this insecure, controlling person to everyone in his life, and I had no idea. When I got home and confronted James about talking to his coworkers about our relationship, he tried to downplay it by saying he was just venting about wedding stress and asking for advice. But I pointed out that asking whether it's normal for fiancés to be jealous is not the same as venting about wedding planning. He was specifically framing me as the problem and asking other people to validate that I was being unreasonable. James said that I talked to my friends about our relationship too, so why can't he talk to his friends about it? But I explained that there's a difference between talking through problems with close friends and presenting a one-sided version of events to coworkers and acquaintances. When I talk to Carly or my close friends about relationship stuff, I'm looking for actual advice and perspective. James is looking for people to agree with him that I'm being difficult. The fight escalated when James accused me of being paranoid and said that maybe his friends and coworkers are noticing something that I can't see about my own behavior. He said that when multiple people are telling you the same thing, maybe you should consider that they might have a point instead of assuming everyone else is wrong. I couldn't believe he was actually suggesting that I should take relationship advice from Earl and Tommy, who still acts like he's in a frat. But James kept insisting that outside perspective is valuable and that I'm too close to the situation to see it objectively. He said that maybe I should consider that my boundaries aren't as reasonable as I think they are. Friday morning, I had to leave early for a work presentation, and when I was grabbing my keys from the kitchen counter, I noticed James's phone was plugged in and lit up with a text notification. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the preview showed Victoria's name and something about wedding planning. Without even thinking about it, I picked up his phone to see what she was saying. The message was asking whether James had talked to me about reconsidering the guest list, and whether there was any chance I might change my mind about including her. But when I scrolled up to see the rest of their conversation, I found weeks of messages between them that I had no idea existed. Victoria had been texting James regularly about all kinds of stuff: work drama, family issues, random thoughts about their college days. But mixed in with all the casual conversation were messages about our relationship and our wedding. She kept asking about how wedding planning was going and whether I was being difficult about anything. James would respond by complaining about how stressed I was making him with all my opinions and expectations. In one conversation from a few weeks ago, Victoria was commiserating with James about how hard it must be to plan a wedding with someone who has such strong opinions about everything. James responded by saying that sometimes he wondered if he and Victoria would have had an easier relationship because she was always so laid back about stuff. Victoria replied with a bunch of crying, laughing emojis and said that some people are just naturally more high maintenance than others. They were literally talking about me like I was some kind of difficult burden that James had to deal with. And Victoria was encouraging it, positioning herself as the cool, easygoing girl who would never cause problems like I do. But the worst part was finding messages where James was telling Victoria specific details about our fights. He told her about the time I got upset because she liked all his Instagram posts, and Victoria responded by saying she hadn't even realized she was doing that and that she'd be more careful. James told her she didn't need to change anything, that I was just being sensitive. There were messages about our arguments over the guest list, our disagreements about the wedding budget. James was sharing intimate details about our relationship with his ex-girlfriend, and she was responding with advice and commentary like she was some kind of relationship expert. When James got home from work Friday night, I didn't even give him a chance to make excuses. I just started reading the messages out loud and watching his face change as he realized how completely screwed he was. He tried to explain by saying that he and Victoria have always been able to talk about anything, and that he values her perspective because she knows him so well. He said he wasn't trying to betray my trust. He was just working through his feelings with someone who understands him. But I pointed out that working through your feelings about your relationship with your ex-girlfriend is not normal or appropriate when you're engaged to someone else. James got frustrated and said that I was making this into something it wasn't, that Victoria was just being a supportive friend and helping him navigate a stressful time. But I read him the message where she said some people are naturally more high maintenance and asked him how that was being supportive of our relationship. He couldn't answer that. So instead, he got mad at me for going through his phone and violating his privacy. He said that if I trusted him, I wouldn't feel the need to check his messages, and that my snooping was just proving his friend's point about me being controlling and insecure. I told him that finding out my fiancé has been sharing intimate details about our relationship with his ex-girlfriend is not about trust or insecurity. It's about basic respect and appropriate boundaries. But James kept trying to flip it back on me, saying that healthy relationships require trust, and that I was looking for problems where none existed. My sister Carly called me Thursday night just to check in about wedding stuff, and I ended up telling her everything. She was absolutely furious and said she's been worried about James's friend group from the beginning because they're all still acting like they're in college. She pointed out that it's weird for a group of guys in their late 20s to be so invested in each other's relationships, and that healthy friend groups don't vote on whether someone should break up with their partner. Carly also said something that really stuck with me. She asked why James needs his friend's approval to marry me. If he loves me and wants to spend his life with me, why does it matter what Tommy or anyone else thinks? The fact that he's so concerned about their opinion suggests that maybe he's not as sure about our relationship as he claims to be. But when I told her about the messages with Victoria, Carly lost her mind completely. She said that James is basically having an emotional affair and using Victoria as a sounding board for all his relationship problems, instead of working through them with me. She pointed out that going to your ex for advice about your current relationship is the definition of inappropriate, and that Victoria is obviously encouraging the drama because she enjoys being positioned as the understanding one. Carly said I needed to seriously consider whether I wanted to marry someone who discusses our private business with his ex-girlfriend and lets his friends vote on whether I'm good enough for him. She said that this kind of behavior doesn't get better after marriage. It gets worse, because then he'll feel like he has even more ownership over the relationship. Saturday morning, James tried to smooth things over by suggesting we take a day trip to the outlet mall about an hour away to look for some last-minute wedding stuff. I think he was hoping that spending time together outside of our apartment would help us get back to normal, but I was still fuming about everything I'd discovered. While we were walking through the mall, James kept trying to bring up wedding details like nothing had happened. He wanted to talk about whether we should upgrade the flowers and whether we had enough RSVPs back yet. But I kept thinking about how he'd been complaining to Victoria about my opinions and expectations, and how his friends think he should dump me. When we stopped at the food court for lunch, James finally addressed the elephant in the room by saying that maybe we should talk to his friends together so I could see for myself that they don't actually dislike me. He suggested having everyone over for dinner so I could show them that I'm not the controlling person they think I am. I told him I wasn't interested in auditioning for his friends' approval, and that the fact that he thought I should have to prove myself to them showed how completely backwards his priorities are. But James kept insisting that it would help clear the air, and that once they got to know me better, they'd realize their concerns were unfounded. The conversation got heated right there in the middle of the food court, with James saying I was being stubborn, and me pointing out that I shouldn't have to campaign for my own fiancé's friends to think I'm worthy of him. A couple of teenagers at the next table were obviously listening to us argue, and I felt mortified that we were having this conversation in public. But James didn't seem to care about the scene we were making. He kept pushing his point about how important his friends' opinions are to him, and how he needs them to be comfortable with our relationship. He said that if I really loved him, I'd make an effort to build relationships with the people who matter to him, even if it was uncomfortable for me. I'm supposed to meet with my mom this weekend to talk about final details for the bridal shower, but now I don't even know what to tell her. How do you explain that your fiancé's friends think he should dump you, and that he's not completely disagreeing with them? How do you admit that your fiancé has been discussing your private relationship details with his ex-girlfriend and asking his coworkers for advice on how to handle your unreasonable behavior? The wedding is 5 weeks away, and I feel like I don't even know the person I'm supposed to marry anymore. The man I fell in love with would never have let his friends vote on our relationship or shared intimate details about our fights with his ex. But apparently that man never existed. Or James has changed into someone completely different. I keep going back and forth between feeling hurt and feeling absolutely livid. Part of me wants to call off the wedding just to see how his precious friends react when their vote doesn't matter anymore. But the bigger part of me is starting to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe James and I aren't as compatible as I thought we were. Second update. Well, things have escalated in ways I never could have predicted, and I'm honestly questioning everything about this man I thought I knew. First, thank you to everyone who told me I needed to stand my ground. The comments about how James is basically having an emotional affair with Victoria really opened my eyes to how serious this is. And to the person who said his friends sound like a toxic boys club, you were absolutely right. So Sunday, I was supposed to meet my mom at this little cafe near her house to go over bridal shower details. My mom has been so excited about this wedding and has been planning this shower for months. She had this whole list of games and decorations and was talking about how proud she was that I found such a great guy. I kept trying to focus on what she was saying about the menu and the guest list, but all I could think about was James telling Victoria that I'm high maintenance and his friends voting on whether he should dump me. Finally, my mom stopped talking and asked what was wrong because I obviously wasn't listening. I tried to brush it off and say I was just stressed about wedding planning, but my mom knows me too well. She kept pushing until I finally broke down and told her everything. The bachelor party vote, James sharing our private business with Victoria, the messages I found, all of it. My mom was furious. Like I have never seen her this angry in my entire life. She started going off about how James has disrespected not just me, but our entire family by allowing his friends to discuss our relationship like that. She said that a real man doesn't let his buddies trash talk his fiancé, and he certainly doesn't go crying to his ex-girlfriend about relationship problems. Then my mom said something that really hit me hard. She asked if I had told my dad about any of this, and when I said no, she said I needed to tell him immediately. She said my dad would be absolutely devastated to know that James has been letting people disrespect his daughter this way, and that he deserves to know what kind of man he's about to welcome into our family. The thought of having to tell my dad about this made me realize how humiliating this whole situation really is. My parents have been so supportive of James and so excited about the wedding. They've been bragging to their friends about their future son-in-law and talking about how happy they are that I found someone who treats me well. How am I supposed to tell them that he's actually been letting his friends debate whether I'm worthy of him? My mom canceled the rest of our bridal shower planning and said we needed to have a serious family conversation. She called my dad and asked him to come meet us at the house because we needed to talk about something important. The whole drive over there, I was dreading having to explain this mess to him. When we got to my parents' house, my dad was waiting in the living room with this concerned look on his face. My mom sat down next to him and told me to explain everything from the beginning. So I had to go through the whole story again. The vote, the Victoria messages, everything. My dad got quiet in that scary way he does when he's really angry. He didn't interrupt or ask questions, he just sat there listening with his jaw getting tighter and tighter. When I finished talking, he was quiet for a long time before he finally spoke. He said that in 35 years of marriage, he has never once let his friends criticize my mom, and he's never shared private details about their relationship with other women. He said that protecting your partner from disrespect is one of the most basic responsibilities of being in a relationship, and that James has failed at that in every possible way. Then my dad asked if James had ever apologized for any of this, or if he was planning to cut contact with Victoria and set boundaries with his friends. When I admitted that James still thinks I'm overreacting and wants me to meet with Victoria to prove I'm not controlling, my dad looked like he wanted to punch something. My mom suggested that maybe they should have a conversation with James directly, and I panicked because I could picture how badly that would go. James would probably get defensive and make it sound like I was being dramatic, and then my parents would think even less of him. But my dad said that if James is going to be part of this family, he needs to understand that disrespecting me means disrespecting all of us. Monday morning, I had to go back to work, and I was honestly grateful for the distraction. My coworker Natalie noticed I seemed off and asked if everything was okay with wedding planning. I didn't want to get into the whole story at work, but I ended up telling her about the bachelor party situation. Natalie was shocked and said that her husband's friends would never dream of doing something like that. She said that when you're in a committed relationship, your partner should be defending you to their friends, not letting them vote on whether you're good enough. But then Natalie said something that really stuck with me. She asked if I had noticed any other red flags in my relationship with James that I might have been ignoring. She said that usually when guys let their friends disrespect their girlfriends, there are other signs of problems that get overlooked. I started thinking about it, and I realized there have been other times when James has prioritized other people's opinions over my feelings. Like when we were looking at apartments and he kept wanting to get input from Tommy about which neighborhood we should choose, even though Tommy doesn't even live in our city. Or when we were planning our engagement party and James kept changing the details based on what his friends suggested, even when I had already made decisions about things. I've always just thought of James as someone who values other people's input, but now I'm wondering if he's actually just someone who doesn't trust his own judgment or mine. Maybe the Victoria thing and the bachelor party vote are just part of a bigger pattern of him looking to other people for validation about our relationship. That afternoon, I got a text from James asking if we could meet at the park near our apartment to talk. He said he'd been thinking about our conversation over the weekend and wanted to clear the air. I agreed because I was hoping he had finally realized how messed up his behavior has been. When I got to the park, James was sitting on one of the benches near the playground, looking all serious. He started off by saying that he'd been doing some soul searching, and that he understood why I was upset about the messages with Victoria. He said he could see how it would look inappropriate from my perspective. I thought maybe we were finally getting somewhere, but then he said that he still thought I was overreacting to the bachelor party thing. He said that his friends were just looking out for him, and that maybe I should consider their perspective instead of just being offended by it. He claimed that they weren't trying to be mean. They were just concerned about whether we're really compatible. I asked him point blank whether he thought his friends were right about me being controlling and jealous. James hesitated for way too long before saying that he thought there might be some truth to their concerns, but that he loves me anyway and wants to work through it. Loves me anyway. Like my personality flaws are something he has to tolerate instead of something he actually appreciates about me. Like he's doing me some kind of favor by staying with me despite my obvious inadequacies. I told him that if he really thinks I'm controlling and jealous, then maybe we shouldn't be getting married. A marriage should be between two people who actually like each other, not someone who thinks his partner has fundamental personality problems that need to be fixed. James backtracked and said he didn't mean it like that, but then he started talking about how we could work on our communication and maybe do couples counseling to address some of these issues. He made it sound like going to therapy was something I needed to prove that I was willing to change my controlling behavior. The conversation got heated when I pointed out that the real problem isn't my personality. It's the fact that he discusses our private business with his ex-girlfriend and lets his friends vote on our relationship. James got frustrated and said that I was missing the point, that the issue is how other people perceive our dynamic, not just what we think about it ourselves. He kept insisting that outside perspective is valuable, and that maybe we're both too close to the situation to see it clearly. But I pointed out that his friends and Victoria are not neutral observers. They have their own opinions and agendas that aren't necessarily in our best interest. Then James said something that really made me see red. He said that maybe the reason I don't want outside input is because deep down, I know that some of their criticisms are valid, and I'm afraid of having to confront my own behavior. I couldn't believe he was trying to turn this back on me and make it seem like I was the one with the problem. I told him that I'm not afraid of criticism. I'm angry that my fiancé thinks it's appropriate to let other people evaluate whether I'm good enough for him instead of making that decision himself. James said that he has made that decision. He proposed to me, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to feedback from people who care about us. He said that marriages work best when both partners are willing to grow and change based on input from their community. But I pointed out that his community seems to consist mainly of people who think I'm the problem, not people who are actually invested in helping our relationship succeed. His friends voted that he should dump me, and his ex-girlfriend thinks I'm high maintenance. That's not a supportive community. That's a group of people who don't want us to be together. Finally, I asked him directly what he wants from me. Does he want me to apologize to Victoria? Does he want me to invite her to the wedding? Does he want me to sit down with his friends and let them explain to me why I'm not good enough for him? James said that he wants me to make an effort to build relationships with the people who are important to him, even if it's uncomfortable. He said that if I really love him, I should be willing to prove to his friends that their concerns are unfounded, instead of just being offended that they have concerns in the first place. I told him that I'm not going to audition for his friends' approval, and that the fact that he thinks I should is a bigger red flag than anything I've supposedly done wrong. A partner who loves and respects you doesn't make you prove your worth to other people. Wednesday evening, I was at the grocery store picking up stuff for dinner when I ran into Deborah, James's mom. We've always gotten along pretty well, and she seemed excited to see me. She started talking about how much she's looking forward to the wedding and asking about final details. But then she mentioned that James had told her we were having some pre-wedding stress and that she hoped we were working through it okay. I tried to keep it vague and just said that wedding planning can be overwhelming, but Deborah kept pushing for details. Finally, she said that James had mentioned I was having some concerns about his female friendships, and she wanted me to know that she thought it was important for married couples to maintain their individual relationships. She said that when she and James's dad got married, she had to learn to be comfortable with his female friends, and that it made their marriage stronger. I realized that James had been talking to his mother about our relationship problems too, and probably presenting it as me being jealous of his friendships, rather than him having inappropriate conversations with his ex. Deborah clearly had no idea about the Victoria messages or the bachelor party vote. She just knew that I was uncomfortable with James's female friends. Deborah went on to say that she hoped I would give Victoria a chance because she's such a sweet girl and has been part of their friend group for so long. She said that Victoria has always been very respectful of James's relationships and that she didn't think I had anything to worry about. I wanted to tell her about the text messages and how Victoria has been encouraging James to see me as high maintenance, but I didn't want to get into a confrontation with my future mother-in-law in the middle of the grocery store. Instead, I just said that I appreciated her advice and that James and I were working through our communication. But the whole interaction made me realize that James has been talking to everyone in his life about our relationship problems. His friends, his co-workers, his ex-girlfriend, and now his mother. And in every case, he's presenting himself as the reasonable one who's trying to deal with his difficult fiancé. When I got home and told James about running into his mother, he said that it's normal to talk to your family about relationship issues. But I pointed out that there's a difference between asking for advice and complaining about your partner to everyone who will listen. James said that he's not complaining about me. He's trying to get perspective on how to handle a difficult situation. But I asked him why he never talks to me directly about these concerns, instead of discussing them with everyone else first. Why does Victoria get to hear about our problems before I do? Why do his friends get to vote on our relationship before we even have a conversation about their concerns? Thursday morning, I was supposed to have a final dress fitting, but I called and canceled because I honestly can't imagine walking down the aisle to marry someone who thinks his friends' opinions matter more than mine. The whole thing feels surreal, like I'm planning a wedding for a relationship that doesn't actually exist. I keep thinking about what my dad said about protecting your partner from disrespect. James hasn't just failed to protect me from disrespect. He's actively participated in it. He's encouraged his friends to criticize me. He's given his ex-girlfriend ammunition to judge our relationship, and he's made me sound like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. The wedding is 4 weeks away, and I still don't know what I'm going to do. My sister Carly keeps texting me, asking how things are going, and I know she's going to tell me to run if I give her the full update. My parents are waiting to hear whether I want them to have that conversation with James. And James is acting like everything is fine and we're just having normal pre-wedding jitters. And this is why I said he has no idea what's coming. I've been doing some thinking of my own. And I've realized that if James wants outside perspective on our relationship so badly, maybe it's time he got some perspective he wasn't expecting. The question is whether I have the guts to actually go through with what I'm planning. Because once I do this, there's no going back. And James is going to realize that he seriously underestimated the woman he's been calling controlling and jealous. Stay tuned, because the next update is going to be a doozy. Last update. Okay, everyone, this is it. The moment you've all been waiting for. James thought he could let his friends vote on whether I'm good enough for him and share our private business with his ex. Well, he was about to find out exactly what kind of woman he's been calling controlling and jealous. First, I want to thank everyone who told me to stand my ground and not let this man disrespect me. The comment about how I should give James the same energy he's been giving me really stuck with me. But what happened next was something I never could have predicted. Wednesday afternoon, my sister Carly was driving back from her dentist appointment when she decided to stop by that little shopping plaza near downtown to grab some stuff from Target. She was walking through the parking lot when she spotted James's car parked outside the flower shop. Carly thought maybe he was finally getting me flowers to apologize for all the drama we'd been having, so she decided to wait and see if he wanted company or needed help picking something out. She parked a few spots away and was about to get out when James came walking out of the flower shop with this massive bouquet of red roses. She was actually happy for a second, thinking he was making a grand gesture to fix things between us. But then, instead of getting in his car and driving toward our apartment, James drove in the completely opposite direction. Carly got curious and decided to follow him because something felt off about the whole situation. Why would he buy me flowers and then drive away from where I live? She kept a safe distance behind him as he drove about 15 minutes across town to Park, which is this big area with walking trails and an old amusement park section. That's when she saw her. Victoria was waiting on a bench near the carousel wearing this cute little sundress and looking like she was posing for some kind of romantic movie. James walked up to her with those roses, my roses that I thought were for me, and handed them to her like they were meeting for some kind of date. Carly said she literally could not believe what she was seeing. James was supposed to be my fiancé, dealing with pre-wedding stress, and here he was giving romantic flowers to his ex-girlfriend in a park like they were teenagers sneaking around. But it got so much worse. Victoria jumped up and threw her arms around James when she saw the flowers, and they hugged for way longer than any normal friend hug. Then they sat down on that bench together, and James had his arm around her shoulders, while she was snuggled up against him, looking at the roses and smelling them. Carly said they looked like a couple who'd been together for years, not like a guy who was supposed to be marrying someone else in 3 weeks. Victoria had her head on James's shoulder, and they were talking really intimately, with James stroking her hair and Victoria touching his chest. At one point, Victoria looked up at James with this dreamy expression and said something that made him laugh and leaned down to kiss her forehead. Then she turned toward him more, and they were face to face, just staring into each other's eyes like something straight out of a romance novel. My sister recording all of this on her phone. She got clear video of James giving Victoria the roses, them sitting together all cuddled up, him stroking her hair, the forehead kiss, all of it. The video clearly shows James being affectionate and romantic with his ex-girlfriend while he's engaged to me. Carly said she sat there for almost an hour watching them act like a couple. They got up and walked around the park holding hands, went on the carousel together laughing and acting all playful, and then went back to their bench to sit close together some more. When Carly finally drove home, she was shaking. She was so angry. She called me immediately and told me everything, and I honestly didn't believe her at first. I thought maybe she was mistaken about what she was seeing, or that there was some innocent explanation. But then she showed me the video, and I just lost it. There was my fiancé, the man who'd been telling me I was jealous and controlling for not wanting his ex at our wedding, literally having what looked like a romantic date with that same ex-girlfriend, buying her flowers, cuddling with her, acting like they were together. All those months of James telling me that Victoria was just a friend, that I was being paranoid about their relationship, that I needed to trust him and stop being so insecure. Meanwhile, he was meeting up with her in secret and treating her like his girlfriend. I was so angry I could barely think straight. So I decided to go through with my original plan for the family meeting. But now I had nuclear evidence. Friday evening, I texted James and told him I wanted to have that serious conversation about our future with some of the important people in our lives there for support and perspective. I suggested we meet at the community center near our apartment since it has those meeting rooms you can reserve. James was actually excited about this because he thought I was finally agreeing to his stupid idea about getting his friends involved to work things out. He asked if he should invite Tommy and a couple of the other guys, and I said sure, the more perspectives the better. He was so pleased with himself for finally getting me to see reason, but James had no idea what was coming. I got to the community center early and set up in one of the larger meeting rooms. James showed up with Tommy and 2 other guys from his bachelor party crew, looking all confident like they were about to have some kind of intervention where they'd explain to me why I needed to change my behavior. But then my backup arrived. My parents walked in, followed by Carly, and then my Uncle Edward. James's face went completely white when he realized this wasn't going to be the conversation he was expecting. I started the meeting by thanking everyone for coming to discuss James's and my relationship. I said that since James values outside perspectives so much and thinks it's important for other people to weigh in on whether we're compatible, I thought we should get some different viewpoints. Then I asked James to explain to my family what happened at his bachelor party. I wanted him to tell my parents about how his friends took a vote on whether he should dump me because I wouldn't invite his ex-girlfriend to our wedding. James started stammering and trying to downplay it, but Tommy actually defended it and said that they were just being honest about their concerns because they care about James's happiness. That's when my mom opened her folder and started reading excerpts from the text messages between James and Victoria. When I had first discovered those messages on James's phone, I had photographed everything so I'd have proof, and I had shared all the screenshots with my family so they'd know exactly what we were dealing with. She read the ones where Victoria called me high maintenance and where James complained about our private relationship details. And that's when James completely exploded. He jumped up from his chair and started screaming that I had violated his privacy and that going through his phone was psychotic behavior. He was yelling about how I was trying to manipulate everyone by taking his messages out of context and making him look bad. But then James said something that made my blood run cold. He looked directly at my parents and started claiming that the reason I was so paranoid about Victoria was because I had been cheating on him. He said I was projecting my own guilt onto him, and that's why I was so suspicious of his friendships. James kept going, getting louder and more desperate. He started telling my family that I had been acting strange for months, being secretive about my phone, working late more often, and that he'd suspected I was seeing someone else. He said the whole Victoria thing was just me trying to deflect attention from my own affair. Tommy jumped in to support this lie, saying that James had confided in them about his concerns and that they'd all noticed changes in my behavior. The other guys started nodding along, claiming they'd seen me being flirty with other guys when we all hung out together. My sister Carly lost her mind. She started screaming at James about what a pathetic liar he was and how dare he make up disgusting accusations to cover for his own terrible behavior. My dad stood up and his voice was shaking with rage when he told James that he had 30 seconds to take back what he just said before this conversation turned into something much worse. My Uncle Edward was trying to calm everyone down, but you could see he was furious too. But James wouldn't back down. He kept insisting that I was cheating and that everyone needed to know the truth about who I really am. He said I was a manipulative liar who was trying to turn everyone against him to cover up my own infidelity. That's when Deborah, James's mother, showed up. Apparently, James had texted her when he realized this wasn't going the way he planned, and she came rushing over to defend her precious son. She walked into this complete chaos with everyone screaming at each other and immediately started attacking my family. Deborah started yelling at my parents about how they raised a daughter who goes through other people's phones and stages public humiliation. She said I was obviously unstable and that James deserved better than someone who would pull a stunt like this. My mom stood up and told Deborah that her son was a cheater and a liar who had been cheating with his ex-girlfriend for months. Deborah screamed back that Victoria was just a friend and that I was too jealous and insecure to handle normal relationships. The whole room was in complete chaos with both families screaming at each other. Deborah was going off about how her son would never cheat and how I was obviously the one with problems if I couldn't trust normal friendships. She said that Victoria has always been respectful of James's relationships and that I was just looking for excuses to cause drama. James started getting even more aggressive, saying that he'd been patient with my jealous behavior for too long and that maybe his friends were right about me being too controlling for marriage. He said that normal women don't go through their partner's phones and stage family confrontations. That's when I finally stood up and pulled out my phone. I told everyone to shut up and watch what I was about to show them. I turned the volume all the way up and hit play on Carly's video. Everyone watched James hand a huge bouquet of roses to Victoria at the park. You could hear Carly's commentary as she filmed him hugging Victoria, sitting with his arm around her, stroking her hair, kissing her forehead. Deborah's face went completely pale as she watched her son acting like a boyfriend with his ex-girlfriend. You could see Victoria looking up at James all lovingly, and James being tender and romantic with her, while he's supposed to be planning a wedding with me. The video was crystal clear. This wasn't just friends hanging out. This was a romantic date between two people who are obviously involved with each other. James tried to grab my phone and delete the video, but my dad blocked him. James was screaming that it wasn't what it looked like, that he was just consoling Victoria because she was going through a hard time, that it was innocent. But Deborah was staring at the video, and you could see her whole world crashing down. She asked James when this happened and why he had bought flowers for another woman. She asked why he was touching Victoria like that if they were just friends. James started making up more lies, saying that Victoria had been having family problems and needed a friend, that the flowers were just to cheer her up, that I was taking everything out of context. James was getting more and more desperate, alternating between claiming the video was misleading and trying to turn it back on me for having Carly follow him. He said I was stalking him and violating his privacy, that this proved how controlling and crazy I really am. But my Uncle Edward pointed out that James was the one who got caught red-handed having a romantic encounter with his ex-girlfriend, and that trying to blame me for discovering it was just more manipulation. I pulled off my engagement ring and threw it at James. I told him that he could keep making up stories about me, but everyone in this room had just watched him cheating on me with Victoria, while calling me paranoid for being suspicious of their relationship. Deborah was crying and apologizing to my parents, saying she had no idea James had been lying about Victoria. My mom was yelling at James about what a disgusting liar he is for making up cheating accusations when he's the one who was actually cheating. As we were leaving, James was still screaming that I had set him up, and that having me followed proved how unstable I am. But Carly turned around and told him that she happened to see him by accident, and that if he didn't want to get caught cheating, maybe he shouldn't cheat in public places. The aftermath has been absolutely wild. James has been blowing up my phone, alternating between apologizing and claiming that his relationship with Victoria isn't what it looks like. He keeps saying that if I would just let him explain, I'd understand that they're just friends going through a difficult time. But here's the crazy part. Victoria has been posting on social media photos of the roses James gave her. She's literally flaunting their relationship while James is trying to convince me it was innocent. I dodged the biggest bullet of my life. A man who would cheat with his ex while planning our wedding, then make up accusations about me cheating when confronted, is not someone I could ever trust. James thought he was so smart, letting his friends vote on our relationship while secretly dating Victoria on the side, but he had no idea that his lies would catch up to him in such a spectacular way. I'm single, and I've never felt more free.
During our son's parent-teacher meeting, my wife joked, "He tries to help with homework, but honestly, he's dumber than the kids." The teacher laughed uncomfortably. I just smiled. A month later, she was explaining custody papers. There are moments that change your life. Most of them are big and loud, like a car crash or a wedding. Mine was quiet. It was the sound of my wife's condescending little laugh in a stuffy, overheated classroom, and it was the moment I knew my marriage was over. I just had to figure out how to blow it up without taking my son down with it. Let me give you the rundown. My name is Paul. I'm 42. My wife, Jessica, is 38. We've been married for 12 years. We have a 10-year-old son, Leo. I own a small business that does custom metal fabrication. I work with my hands. I build things that are strong and real. I'm not a fancy guy. I didn't go to some Ivy League school. Jessica did, and for 12 years, she has never, ever let me forget it. She's a corporate lawyer, smart, sharp, and absolutely ruthless. In the beginning, I thought our differences were a good thing. She was the brains, I was the brawn, a team. But over the years, that dynamic curdled. In her eyes, I wasn't her partner, I was her pet project. The simple, working-class husband she could trot out to show how grounded she was before making a joke at my expense to put me back in my place. The jokes were constant. At dinner parties, if I talked about a project I was proud of, she'd chime in with something like, "It's so cute how excited he gets about playing with his tools." In front of her family, she'd correct my grammar like I was a child. But the worst of it was what she was doing to our son. She was teaching Leo to see me the same way she did, as a lovable but ultimately incompetent fool. If he asked me for help with his math homework, she'd sigh dramatically and say, "Why don't you wait for me, honey? Daddy gets confused with the big numbers." I tried to fight it. We had a dozen screaming matches about it. Each one ended the same way, with me being accused of being insecure and oversensitive, and with her giving me the silent treatment for a week until I finally gave in, just for the sake of peace in the house. I was trapped. If I left, I was terrified she would use her money and her legal connections to take my son from me. So I stayed. I took the hits. I let her chip away at my dignity, piece by piece, because I couldn't bear the thought of losing my boy. Then came the parent-teacher meeting last month. Leo was struggling a bit in science. Nothing major, just having a hard time with some of the concepts. We were all sitting at a tiny table in his classroom, me, Jessica, and his teacher, a kind but flustered woman named Mrs. Davison. Mrs. Davison was explaining a new project. "We're encouraging the parents to get involved to help the kids build their models at home," she said. Jessica let out a little, tinkling laugh. "Well, I'll be handling that, of course," she said, patting my arm in that fake, placating way of hers. Then she looked at Mrs. Davison, leaned in as if sharing a hilarious secret, and said the words that ended my marriage. "He tries to help with homework, but honestly, he's dumber than the kids." Mrs. Davison's professional smile froze on her face. She let out a short, deeply uncomfortable laugh and quickly looked down at her papers. But I saw it all, the pity in her eyes, the public confirmation of my status as the family idiot, and it wasn't just about me. It was about my son. In that room, in front of the person responsible for his education, my wife had declared me an unfit father. I didn't react, I didn't get angry, I just smiled. A quiet, tight smile. I sat through the rest of that meeting, nodding in all the right places, but my mind was a million miles away. The part of me that had been scared, the part that had been willing to endure anything to keep the peace, just died. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just going to leave her anymore. I was going to take my son with me, and I was going to use her own arrogance and cruelty to do it. The war had begun. She just didn't know it yet. Update 1. The month after that parent-teacher meeting was the most difficult and most important of my life. I was living a double life. On the surface, I was the same old Paul, the dutiful husband, the slightly dumb dad. I let her jokes and insults slide off me. I didn't start any fights. I gave her no reason to suspect that anything had changed. But behind the scenes, I was a man preparing for war. My objective was simple: to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I was the better parent and that her influence was toxic to our son. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the best, most aggressive family law attorney in the city. A guy named Marcus Thorne. He was expensive, but I sold off some old equipment and drained my personal savings to pay his retainer. In our first meeting, I laid everything out. I told him about Jessica's constant belittling, the jokes, the way she undermined me with our son. I told him about the parent-teacher meeting. He was blunt. "Judges hate it when one parent alienates the other," he said. "But you need more than just stories. You need proof. Hard, undeniable proof." So I became a spy in my own home. I bought a few small, voice-activated audio recorders. I put one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and one in Leo's playroom. It felt slimy, but Marcus had assured me it was legal in our state as long as I was a party to the conversation, and the recordings were made in my own home. The evidence I gathered was sickening and utterly damning. I captured dozens of instances of her cruelty. A recording from the kitchen. Leo asks me about a historical event, school project. I start to explain it. Jessica cuts me off. Leo, honey, don't listen to him. He probably thinks the dinosaurs are still alive. Let's look it up on a real website after your dad is done helping. A recording from the living room. We're watching a documentary. I make a comment about a scientific principle. She laughs. Did you learn that from one of your tool catalogs, Paul? It's cute that you try. The worst was a conversation I recorded between her and her sister on the phone. She had put it on speaker, thinking I was out in the garage. I don't know how much longer I can take it, she sighed. It's like having 2 children. I swear, Leo is already smarter than he is. My only hope is that the kid inherited my genes. While I was gathering this arsenal of evidence, I launched the second phase of my plan, Operation Superdad. I completely took over everything related to Leo's schooling and extracurriculars. I made it my mission to help him with his science project, the very thing she had mocked me over. The project was to build a model of the solar system. Jessica wanted to buy one of those expensive, pre-made kits. I had a better idea. I took Leo to my workshop. For the next 3 weekends, we built a solar system from scratch. We used scrap metal, ball bearings, and a small motor. We welded, we painted, we figured out the gear ratios to make the planets actually orbit the sun at different speeds. Leo was completely captivated. He was learning about mechanics, about engineering, about how to create something real with his own hands. He was seeing his dumb dad in a whole new light. The day he took that project to school, he was beaming. He got the highest grade in the class. Mrs. Davison sent me a personal email telling me it was the most impressive project she had seen in her 15 years of teaching. I saved that email. It was Exhibit B. I also started documenting everything. I created a detailed log, every insult from Jessica, with the date, time, and a corresponding audio file. Every hour I spent helping Leo with his homework. Every school event I attended, and every one she skipped because she had a work emergency. I was building a case, piece by methodical piece. The final piece of the puzzle was our finances. I knew she would use her money as a weapon. Marcus and I worked with a forensic accountant. We went through 12 years of bank records. We found that while I had been pouring my income into our joint accounts to pay for the mortgage, the bills, and Leo's expenses, she had been diverting a significant portion of her large salary into a private investment portfolio. A secret nest egg she had never told me about. She was preparing to leave me. And she was planning on taking as much of my money as she could, while protecting all of hers. After a month of this silent, intense preparation, I was ready. I had a mountain of evidence. I had a clear record of my parental involvement. I had a detailed picture of her financial deceit, and I had the custody papers, drafted by Marcus, that formally requested primary physical and legal custody of our son. I chose my moment carefully. It was a Friday night. She had just gotten home from work, bragging about some big case she had won. She was in a good mood, feeling powerful and superior. "That's great, honey," I said, my voice calm. I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up a large manila envelope. "Speaking of legal matters, I have something for you." I handed it to her. She took it, a confused smile on her face. She opened it and pulled out the papers. I watched as her smile slowly dissolved, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending shock. "What is this?" she whispered. "Custody papers? Is this a joke?" "No," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "It's not a joke. It's a consequence. You have spent years treating me like an idiot. You have spent years trying to turn our son against me. You have publicly declared me to be dumber than the kids. Well, this idiot just spent the last month building a case against you that is going to ensure that our son is raised by the parent who actually respects him. You've been served, Jessica." Update 2. The explosion was everything I expected it to be, and more. For a woman who prided herself on her composure, Jessica lost it completely. The custody papers were a declaration of war she had never imagined I was capable of launching. She screamed, she cried, she threw a glass against the wall. She called me every name in the book. A monster, a snake, a manipulative loser who was trying to poison her son against her. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. I didn't engage. I just stood there, a calm island in the middle of her hurricane of rage. When she finally wound down, sputtering and exhausted, I said one thing. My lawyer's name is on the papers. Have your lawyer contact him. I'm taking Leo to my brother's house for the weekend. We'll be back on Sunday. Then I walked out, got my son, and left her standing in the wreckage of the life she thought she had under complete control. The next few weeks were a brutal, ugly slog through the legal trenches. She hired a team of expensive lawyers who came at me with everything they had. They tried to paint me as an unfit father. They claimed I was a simple-minded tradesman who couldn't provide the intellectually stimulating environment that a bright boy like Leo needed. They claimed I had a history of anger issues, citing our past arguments as proof. It was a good strategy. But I had a better one. I had the truth, and I had the receipts. In our first deposition, her lawyer tried to grill me about my education, my business, trying to make me sound like an uncultured moron. I just answered every question calmly and honestly. Then it was my lawyer's turn. Marcus started by asking her about the parent-teacher meeting. She tried to laugh it off, calling her comment a poorly timed joke. A joke? Marcus asked, his voice silky smooth. So, you find your husband's intelligence to be a laughing matter? Do you think it helps your son's development to hear his mother publicly mock his father's intelligence? She stammered, trying to backtrack. Then Marcus pulled out the first of my secret weapons. He played the audio recording of her phone call with her sister, the one where she said I was like her second child and that she hoped Leo had inherited her genes. Her face went completely white. Her lawyers started frantically shuffling papers. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus dismantled her. He played recording after recording, her telling Leo not to listen to me about his homework, her mocking me in front of friends. He presented the log I had kept, a month-long, detailed account of her campaign of parental alienation. He presented the email from Mrs. Davison, praising my involvement and the incredible science project Leo and I had built. He presented the photos of me and Leo at his baseball games, at the library, at the museum, all events she had been too busy to attend. The final blow was the financial discovery. When Marcus presented the evidence of her secret investment portfolio, her own lawyer looked at her with a flash of utter shock and betrayal. She had lied to him, just like she had lied to me. The smear campaign she tried to launch with her friends and family also backfired spectacularly. She told them I was trying to steal her son. I responded by sending a single, carefully selected audio clip to her parents and her sister, the one where she was talking about me on the phone. The one that was completely undeniable. Her sister called her in tears, and her parents, who had always been her biggest enablers, were suddenly very, very quiet. The custody battle that she thought she would win in a landslide was turning into a complete and utter rout. Final update. It's been 6 months since I served those papers. The divorce was finalized last week. As I write this, my son Leo is in the next room, asleep in his own bed, in our new house. Our house. We didn't even have to go to court for the final custody hearing. After the depositions, and after her own lawyers realized the mountain of evidence I had against her, they advised her to settle. They knew that if a judge heard those recordings, she wouldn't just lose. She would be annihilated. The settlement was a complete victory. I was granted primary physical and legal custody of our son. She gets him every other weekend and on alternating holidays. That's it. Her campaign to prove I was the incompetent parent had resulted in her being legally designated as the secondary one. The financial settlement was just as satisfying. Because of her documented financial deceit, the judge was not inclined to be generous. Her secret portfolio was rightfully deemed her separate property, but all of our shared assets were divided in my favor. I kept the house, which I then sold. She had to pay for her own expensive lawyers out of her own pocket. Her life, from what I've heard, has completely changed. Without me to pay the mortgage and manage the household, she had to sell her fancy car and move into a small condo. Without her son as a captive audience for her daily insults, she is reportedly very lonely. Her relationship with Leo is strained. He's a smart kid. He sees her for who she is now, not the perfect, all-knowing mother she pretended to be. He has started to push back against her condescension, using the confidence he has built with me over the last few months. I saw her once at Leo's soccer game. She was on the other side of the field with a couple of her friends. She looked smaller, somehow. The arrogant, powerful lawyer was gone, replaced by a tired-looking woman who couldn't even get her own son to come and say hello to her after the game. The ultimate revenge wasn't about money or winning in court. It was about my son. I fought for him. I proved that a good father isn't defined by a college degree or a fancy job title. A good father is defined by his presence, his patience, and his respect. I taught my son that it's not okay for anyone, not even his mother, to treat people with cruelty and contempt. Last week, we had the first parent-teacher meeting of the new school year. It was just me and Mrs. Davison. She told me that Leo is excelling in all his subjects, especially science. She said he's more confident, more engaged. "You've done a wonderful job with him, Mr. Jensen," she told me. I just smiled. And this time, it was a real one. The woman who called me dumber than a 10-year-old is now explaining to her friends why she only gets to see her own son 4 days a month. I didn't have to prove I was smart. I just had to prove I was a father. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. On our wedding day, I overheard my fiancée laughing with her friends. Imagine if my ex just barged in and took me away, like in the movies. They all giggled. I just stood there in silence. An hour later, she learned how this movie really ends. My wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And in a weird, twisted way, it was. It was the day I finally saw everything with perfect clarity. It was the day I dodged a bullet the size of a cannonball, and it was the day I got to be the director of the movie my fiancée had always dreamed of starring in. She just didn't like the ending I wrote. Let's get this out of the way. My name is Ethan. I'm 35. My fiancée Megan was 29. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 1. On the surface, everything was perfect. I have a good job, we lived in a nice house that I owned, and I gave her the life she always said she wanted. But for the last year, something had been eating at me. It was her obsession with her ex-boyfriend, a guy named Kyle. He was the ghost in every room. The guy she'd compare me to, usually in subtle ways. Kyle loved this song. Kyle and I used to come here all the time. I'm not a jealous guy, but I'm not a moron either. I knew she wasn't over him. I tried talking to her about it, and she'd just laugh it off, call me paranoid, and tell me that what they had was ancient history. But her eyes would tell a different story. I'm a pretty straightforward guy. I don't like games. About 6 months before the wedding, I sat her down and laid it on the line. I told her the constant mentions of Kyle were disrespectful, and that if she wasn't fully committed to a future with me, we needed to call it quits. She put on a big show, cried a little, and swore that I was the only one she wanted. She promised to stop bringing him up, to cut him out of our lives for good. For a while, she actually did. I let myself believe that we had turned a corner. I was a fool. Fast forward to our wedding day, last Saturday. The venue was a beautiful old country estate we'd rented for the weekend. I was in my tux, feeling nervous but excited. The ceremony was in an hour. I was walking from my suite to find my best man when I passed the bridal suite, where Megan was getting ready with her bridesmaids. The door was cracked open just enough for me to hear them laughing. I heard her best friend Sarah say, "You seem so calm. Aren't you nervous at all?" And then I heard Megan's voice, giddy and light. "Please, the only thing that would make me nervous is if Kyle was here." They all giggled. Then Megan said the words that would change everything. Can you even imagine, though? Like, what if he just barged in right before I said I do and took me away, like in the movies? That would be so romantic. More giggling. Sarah replied, "Oh my God, you'd totally leave with him, wouldn't you?" And Megan's response was a dreamy sigh. In a heartbeat. I just stood there in the hallway, completely frozen. The world went silent. It wasn't just a joke. It was her deepest, most honest desire, shared with her friends on the day she was supposed to commit her life to me. In a heartbeat. The hurt was a flash, a white, hot pain that lasted about 3 seconds. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold, hard calm. This wasn't a surprise. This was a confirmation of everything my gut had been telling me for a year. The wedding I had paid a fortune for. The future I had planned, it was all a sham. She wasn't marrying me. She was settling for me. I didn't storm in there. I didn't yell. I just turned around and walked back to my suite. My mind was already working, the gears turning with a cold, clear purpose. She wanted a movie. Fine. I was about to give her the blockbuster of a lifetime. Update 1. When I got back to my suite, my best man, my brother, Liam, was there. He saw the look on my face and knew something was wrong. "What's up?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said. I just heard the truth. I told him what I'd overheard. He wasn't surprised. He had never liked Megan, always said there was something fake about her. He just listened, his jaw getting tighter and tighter. When I was done, he just shook his head. "So what are you gonna do?" he asked. "Are you calling it off?" "Oh, I'm calling it off," I said, pulling out my phone. "But I'm not just going to cancel it. She wants a movie. She's going to get one. I need a favor. I need Kyle's number." Liam knew a guy who knew a guy. It was a long shot, but 5 minutes later, a number popped up on his phone. Kyle's number. My next step was crucial. I had bought a burner phone a few months back, a cheap little thing I kept in my car for emergencies. This was an emergency. I grabbed it from my glove compartment. I knew I couldn't just text Kyle from my number. I had to be clever. I needed to sound like one of her desperate bridesmaids. I composed the text carefully. "Kyle, this is Sarah, Megan's friend. You have to get here. Now." Megan is freaking out. She's in the bridal suite, crying her eyes out, saying she can't go through with it. She keeps saying she should be with you. If you ever loved her, you need to come and get her before she makes the biggest mistake of her life. The ceremony is in less than an hour. Don't text back, just come. It was a good story, but I needed a hook, something to make it undeniable. I added one more line. "She's wearing the locket you gave her, the one with the picture of you two. She said she couldn't take it off." It was a complete lie, but a plausible one. He had given her a locket years ago that she used to wear constantly. She still kept it in her jewelry box. I was betting he wouldn't remember if he'd ever gotten it back. I hit send. Then I put the burner phone on silent and slipped it into my pocket. "What now?" Liam asked. "Now," I said, straightening my tie, "we go get married." The next hour was surreal. I went through the motions. I took pictures with my groomsmen. I talked to my parents, telling them how happy I was. I was an actor playing the part of a lifetime. The ceremony began. The music swelled. The guests were all seated in the beautiful garden where the altar was set up. I stood at the front with the officiant, watching the procession. The groomsmen, the bridesmaids, including Sarah, who couldn't even look me in the eye. Then came Megan. She was stunning. A perfect bride walking towards a man she didn't love, her head filled with fantasies of another. She glided down the aisle on her father's arm, a radiant smile on her face. As she reached me, her father placed her hand in mine. She squeezed it, a perfect picture of bridal joy. And just as the officiant opened his book to begin, a commotion started at the back of the garden. Heads turned. A man was striding up the aisle, his face a mixture of confusion and determination. It was Kyle. He was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, looking completely out of place. He walked right up to the altar. The guests were gasping. Megan's face went white. Then, for a split second, I saw it. A flicker of something wild and excited in her eyes. Her fantasy was coming true. "Megan?" Kyle said, his voice shaky. "Sarah texted me. She said you were waiting for me?" Megan just stared at him, speechless. Her mother was about to stand up and scream. Her father looked like he was going to have a heart attack. Before anyone could say another word, I stepped forward. I took the microphone from the officiant's hand. "It's okay, everyone," I said, my voice calm and clear, booming through the speakers. "Please don't be alarmed, I can explain." I turned to Kyle. "Kyle, thank you for coming. You've got great timing. You see, an hour ago, my fiancée here was telling her friends that her ultimate fantasy was for you to barge into our wedding and take her away." I overheard her, and you know, I'm a romantic. I believe in making dreams come true, so I sent you that text, from Sarah. I looked at Sarah, the bridesmaid. She looked like she was going to faint. I looked back at Megan, whose face had gone from shocked to horrified as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. "So go ahead, man," I said to Kyle, gesturing to Megan. "She's all yours. Her fantasy is now your reality. Good luck with that." Then I turned to the stunned crowd of guests. "Folks, I apologize. It appears there won't be a wedding today. Megan has made her choice. But the good news is, everything is paid for. The bar is open, the band is ready to play, and there is a mountain of food. So I invite you all to join me in celebrating my incredible escape from a lifetime of disrespect. Let's party. I dropped the microphone. I walked over to my parents, who were looking at me with a mixture of shock and pride. I hugged my mom. Then I walked straight to the open bar, ordered a double whiskey, and watched the chaos unfold. Update 2. The scene at the altar was pure, unadulterated chaos. Megan was frozen, her face a mask of horror. Kyle looked like a deer in the headlights, realizing he had just walked into the most elaborate and humiliating trap of his life. Megan's father was screaming at him. Her mother was wailing. I just stood at the bar, sipping my whiskey, watching it all unfold. My family and friends, after a moment of stunned silence, started clapping. Liam came over, slapped me on the back, and ordered a drink. My party had officially begun. Megan's family, of course, imploded. Her father, a man who was all about appearances, tried to salvage the situation. He was yelling at Kyle to leave, trying to get Megan to come to her senses. But it was too late. The damage was done. The story was already spreading through the guests like wildfire. Kyle, to his credit, just turned and walked away. He didn't say another word. He just booked it out of there, leaving Megan standing alone at the altar. Her movie fantasy hero had just abandoned her on the set. Megan, supported by her hysterical bridesmaids, was eventually led away into a side room. Her family followed, and a screaming match erupted that could be heard all the way across the garden. A few of her family's guests, the ones who were clearly there out of obligation, made a quiet exit. But most of the guests, my family, my friends, and a surprising number of our mutual acquaintances, stayed. And it turned into the best party I have ever been to. The band, after a brief, confused huddle, started playing upbeat rock and roll instead of cheesy wedding ballads. The bar was mobbed. People were coming up to me all night, shaking my hand, telling me it was the most legendary thing they had ever seen. My Dodged a Bullet party was a massive hit. The financial side of things was a mess, but a mess I had prepared for. The wedding cost a little over $100,000. I had paid for about 70% of it. Her parents had contributed the other 30%. All the contracts were in my name. The deposits were non-refundable. The day after the wedding, my phone was a war zone. Hundreds of texts and missed calls. Voicemails from Megan, alternating between sobbing apologies and furious threats. Voicemails from her father, promising to sue me for every penny I had for publicly humiliating his daughter. I responded to none of them. I had my lawyer handle it. He sent a single, simple letter to Megan's father. It stated that I considered the $30,000 they had contributed to be a gift towards a wedding that their daughter had unilaterally chosen not to participate in. It also included a formal invoice for her half of the non-refundable deposits that I had paid for, totaling a neat $35,000. The letter concluded by saying that if he wished to pursue legal action for humiliation, I would be more than happy to countersue for that amount, and that I would also be happy to subpoena the bridesmaids to testify under oath about the conversation I had overheard. The legal threats stopped immediately. The social fallout was even more devastating for her. The story of what happened at the wedding became a local legend. Everyone had a different version, but they all had the same ending: Megan, the fantasist, getting exactly what she wished for, and it blowing up in her face. Her reputation was in tatters. Kyle, the ex, also faced his own consequences. It turned out he had a serious girlfriend, a woman he had been with for over a year. She was not, to put it mildly, happy about him showing up to another woman's wedding to take her away. She dumped him publicly and spectacularly on social media. His romantic movie moment had cost him his actual relationship. About a week after the wedding, Megan showed up at my house. I was in the front yard doing some landscaping. She got out of her car, looking tired and broken. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't," I replied, not even looking up from the flower bed I was weeding. "Please, Ethan," she begged, her voice cracking. "I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. It was just a silly fantasy, a joke. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," I said, finally looking at her. "It meant that on the day you were supposed to commit to me, you were dreaming of someone else. It meant that our entire relationship was a lie. "It wasn't a lie," she cried. "I do love you. I was just scared. You ruined everything. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know." "I didn't humiliate you, Megan," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I gave you what you wanted. You wanted a movie. You wanted your ex to show up. I was just the director who made it happen. You're the one who wrote the script. The only problem is, you didn't like the ending. That's not my problem." "But what am I supposed to do now?" she wailed. "My life is a mess." "I don't know," I said, turning back to my garden. "Maybe you should go write another movie. Just leave me out of the cast this time." I never spoke to her again. Final update. It's been 6 months. The dust has finally settled. The divorce was uncontested. My lawyer informed hers that any attempt to claim assets would be met with the aforementioned lawsuit and subpoenas, and she signed the papers without a fight. Her parents, in a move that surprised me, actually sent me a check for the $35,000. It came with a short, typed note from her father that simply said, "For the damages." I think it was his way of admitting his daughter was in the wrong. Megan's life, from what I've heard through the grapevine, is a wreck. She had to move back in with her parents. Her friends, including the giggling bridesmaids, abandoned her. Apparently, being the star of the most humiliating wedding story of the year makes you a social pariah. She had to get a normal job, working in retail. The life of glamour and drama she thought she was entitled to is gone. Kyle is still single. His reputation as a home-wrecking idiot has apparently been hard to shake. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. As for me, life is good. I sold the big house. It had too many bad memories. I bought a smaller place, just for me. The $100,000 I spent on that wedding, I don't even see it as a loss. I see it as the price I paid for my freedom. It was the most expensive and most valuable lesson of my life. I'm dating again, someone quiet and kind and real. Someone who thinks my life is interesting, not boring. Someone who would never ever joke about leaving me for someone else. The ultimate revenge wasn't the public spectacle. It was simply taking her at her word. She told me and her friends what she really wanted. I just facilitated it. I gave her the movie-perfect moment she always dreamed of. And, just like in the movies, she now has to live with the consequences of her choices, forever. The credits have rolled and she didn't get the happy ending she was expecting. I, on the other hand, did.
What was your worst day on the job? I'd been working at the office for 2 weeks when my manager pulled me aside and said, "Patrick is coming by at 3 to drop off his laptop, so you need to leave before then." Her hands were shaking, and when I asked who Patrick was, she whispered, "The guy we fired from your position who said he'd kill his replacement." My stomach dropped as everything clicked. The scratch marks on my desk drawers, the dead flowers on my chair the first day, why people avoided eye contact when I worked. In the break room, Naomi from accounting was throwing stuff in her bag. She said the day they fired Patrick, he'd grabbed the security guard's throat and said, "Whoever takes my job is dead." She showed me her car from last week with all 4 tires slashed and a note that said, "For hiring my replacement." I wanted to throw up realizing that was about me. She said security would be here but then checked her phone and went white. The guard just called in sick. Same one who escorted Patrick out. It was noon, 3 hours until he arrived, and people were fleeing. Tom from IT grabbed me, reeking of fierce sweat, and said they'd found a document on Patrick's computer titled Replacement Research, with everyone who'd applied for the job. My photo was circled with notes about my apartment building. They'd also found searches for acids that dissolve bodies, and how to make deaths look accidental, and my legs were shaking so bad I had to sit. By 1 o'clock, the office was emptying, and I was paralyzed by the thought he might be watching the parking lot. My manager came back crying, saying, "I shouldn't have hired you for his position, but corporate insisted." My car had been keyed last week with thief, and I realized he'd been watching me in the parking garage while I worked at his desk. 2 o'clock and only 8 people remained. Leo showed me Patrick's social media. My LinkedIn announcement about the new position with a knife stabbed through it, captioned, "Time to vacate my position." I was shaking as I realized he'd been watching since before I started, planning this every day I'd been here. My keycard was missing from my desk and panic flooded through me. I was trapped. 2:30 and Leo screamed, "He just posted again!" The photo showed our building's lobby from inside, taken 5 minutes ago, the security desk abandoned. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. Everyone ran for the elevator, but it was jammed with something wedged in the doors. The stairs were no better. Keycard reader smashed to pieces. We were trapped on the 10th floor and I could taste bile in my throat. 2:45 and my phone rang from an unknown number. My hand shook as I answered. Patrick's voice. "You're sitting in my chair right now, aren't you? At my desk? Using my keyboard?" I looked around wildly, feeling watched, violated, knowing dozens of hidden cameras could be anywhere. He continued, I worked that position 5 years, built those client relationships, and you've had it 2 weeks. Doesn't seem fair. The line went dead and I was crying, terrified, wishing I'd never taken this job. 2:50, and we heard the freight elevator moving, the one nobody used. My whole body shook violently as Claire whispered that Patrick had worked maintenance before our department, knew every way in and out, had copies of every key. People scattered to hide under desks and in supply closets, but I was frozen at his desk, my legs like concrete. Terror had locked every muscle. 2:55 and the lights went out with a loud pop. I bit my hand to keep from screaming as emergency lighting kicked in. 3 o'clock exactly. Footsteps came from the back hallway, slow and deliberate. My heart hammered so loud I was sure he could hear it from across the office. A voice called out, "I'm here for my laptop and my job. Only one of those is leaving with me." I was sobbing silently, tears blurring my vision as the footsteps got closer. He said, "I know you're at my desk. I can see the heat signature from the camera I installed months ago." Waved to me. The violation of being watched all this time made me want to vomit. I heard him breathing now, harsh and excited, just one row away. The security guard tried to stop me downstairs. He's not conscious anymore. Every instinct screamed run, but I was paralyzed with pure terror. Then he stepped around the corner, face twisted with rage, holding a crowbar with something dark and wet on it, my missing keycard in the other hand, and I knew I was going to die at this desk, his desk, and he smiled like he knew it too. Patrick took another step toward me and raised the crowbar high above his head. My body finally broke through the paralysis and I dropped hard to the floor, my knees hitting the carpet with a painful thud. I rolled sideways under the desk just as the crowbar came down and smashed into the computer monitor where my head had been a second ago. The screen exploded in a shower of glass and sparks that rained down on the floor beside me. My phone was still clutched in my sweaty hand, and I fumbled to unlock it while wedged under the desk, my fingers shaking so bad I could barely type. I managed to open the text to 911 and typed, "Help office attack," before Patrick's feet appeared on the other side of the desk. He was circling around, trying to find an angle to reach me with the crowbar, and I could hear him breathing hard with excitement as he dropped to one knee to look under. I pulled my legs up tight against my chest and scooted further back into the corner where the desk met the wall. His face appeared upside down, eyes wild and unfocused, and he swung the crowbar under the desk but couldn't quite reach me in the corner. Leo suddenly shouted from across the office. Something about calling the cops, and Patrick's head snapped toward the noise. I used those precious seconds to slide out the other side of the desk on my stomach and started crawling on hands and knees between the cubicle panels. The rough carpet burned my palms as I moved fast, staying low, hearing Patrick's heavy footsteps heading toward where Leo had yelled from. My phone vibrated with a text from 911 asking for our exact location and how many people needed help. I pressed myself against a cubicle wall and quickly typed back the building address. 10th floor, 8 people trapped with an armed attacker who already hurt the security guard downstairs. Patrick's voice boomed across the office saying something about this being his workspace, his life. And then I heard a massive crash as he started smashing cubicle walls with the crowbar. The thin panels cracked and splintered under the metal bar as he worked his way systematically through the office, checking each workstation for hiding people. I kept moving in a crouch, using the maze of cubicles to stay ahead of him, pausing only to text updates to the dispatcher about his location in the office. The dispatcher texted back telling me to silence my phone completely and asked what weapon Patrick had and if anyone was hurt. I switched my phone to silent and confirmed he had a crowbar and mentioned the unconscious guard downstairs, my hand still shaking as I typed each word carefully. Another cubicle wall crashed down somewhere behind me, and I could hear Patrick getting closer, his breathing loud and ragged in the quiet office. Claire suddenly whispered my name from behind a big filing cabinet near the copy room. We made eye contact, and she pointed toward the break room, mouthing something about the fire alarm. Patrick was between us and the alarm, still smashing his way through workstations, and we both knew someone would have to distract him. I looked at the distance to the break room, then at Claire crouched behind the cabinet and made a decision that went against every instinct in my body. I stood up suddenly in the middle of the office, fully visible, and Patrick's head whipped toward me instantly. He started moving in my direction with the crowbar raised, and I backed away slowly, keeping his attention on me while Claire sprinted behind him toward the break room. My legs felt like jelly as I moved backward between desks, watching him advance with that crowbar leaving dents in everything he passed. Patrick was completely focused on me, ranting about 5 years of work stolen, and didn't notice Claire reaching the break room door. She yanked the fire alarm and suddenly the office exploded with deafening sirens and strobing white lights that lit up everything in harsh flashes. Patrick stopped mid-step, his face contorting in confusion at the sudden sensory overload, and he spun around trying to figure out what was happening. The sirens were so loud I couldn't hear anything else, just this piercing wail that seemed to drill into my skull. Several of us used the chaos to move toward the conference room at the far end of the office, staying low and using the strobing lights as cover. Patrick was turning in circles, disoriented by the noise and lights, swinging the crowbar at nothing. My phone vibrated with another text from the dispatcher saying the fire alarm had notified emergency services, and they were on the way up. The building's magnetic locks should release on the stairwells, but when two coworkers tried the door, it only opened partway before catching on something. Patrick had jammed something in the mechanism that kept it from opening fully, and people could only squeeze through one at a time if they turned sideways. The sirens kept blaring and the lights kept flashing as we tried to figure out our next move, knowing help was coming, but not knowing how long it would take them to reach us on the 10th floor. My manager suddenly grabbed my arm from behind a desk and pulled me down next to her, her face wet with tears and makeup running everywhere. She held up her phone showing a group text she'd started with everyone still in the office, typing that we needed to move to the archive room. The archive room had a heavy door with an old deadbolt lock that might actually hold against the crowbar better than these thin office doors would. She typed quickly while the sirens kept screaming and told everyone to use the noise as cover to move without Patrick hearing us. I watched Patrick through a gap between cubicles as he shook his head hard, trying to clear the ringing from his ears after the alarm shock. He was turning in circles with the crowbar raised, looking confused and angry as the strobing lights made everything look like stop-motion animation. My manager squeezed my hand and pointed toward the hallway leading to the archive room, then started crawling that direction on her hands and knees. Patrick suddenly stopped spinning and started moving again, more focused now but clearly having trouble tracking sounds over the deafening alarm noise. He swung the crowbar at a desk, sending papers flying everywhere, then stopped to listen for any reaction from us hiding nearby. I realized the sirens were actually helping us because he couldn't hear our movements or whispers over the constant wailing sound filling the office. My phone buzzed with texts from others saying they were using the alarm noise to move toward the archive room one by one. I needed to keep Patrick's attention away from that hallway, so I stood up near the reception desk and knocked over a big potted plant. The crash was barely audible over the sirens, but Patrick's head snapped toward me, and he started moving in my direction fast. He was shouting something, but I couldn't hear the words over the alarm, just saw his mouth moving and face getting redder with rage. I backed away slowly, keeping furniture between us while he followed me away from where the others were escaping to safety. His voice finally broke through the noise, screaming about 5 years of building client relationships that I'd stolen in just 2 weeks. The pain in his voice was real, even through the rage, years of work and identity wrapped up in a job that wasn't his anymore. My phone vibrated and I glanced down to see the dispatcher had sent a message saying they'd connected with our building engineer. The engineer was texting instructions about emergency exits on our floor that Patrick might not know about from his maintenance days. There was an old fire escape on the north side that could be accessed through a window if we could get to it safely. 2 coworkers were working on the stairwell door, using a letter opener and scissors to try clearing whatever Patrick had jammed in there. I kept moving backward from Patrick, then suddenly yelled that I understood he was angry about losing his job, even though he couldn't hear me well. Patrick stopped and tilted his head, trying to make out my words over the sirens, giving the others more time to work on escape routes. He started ranting back about being moved to maintenance after some complaints, treated like he was worthless after 5 years of good work. His voice cracked when he said nobody even looked at him anymore, just walked past like he was invisible or furniture. The hurt underneath his anger felt real, but it didn't make what he was doing okay, and I told him that while staying behind desks. He swung the crowbar into a computer monitor, sending glass and plastic everywhere, then kept moving toward me with that wet crowbar raised. Leo suddenly texted everyone that he'd found a computer still logged in near the break room and could make noise remotely. Within seconds, keyboards started clicking and typing sounds came from empty cubicles all around the office in random patterns. Patrick spun around confused, checking cubicles that were making typing noises but finding nobody there, getting more frustrated with each empty desk. The phantom keyboard sounds kept going off in different areas, making him run back and forth checking workstations while we gained time. Claire texted that she and another coworker had gotten the stairwell door partially open, enough to squeeze through sideways one person at a time. The process was slow because of how narrow the opening was, but at least people could start escaping down the stairs now. I remembered what Patrick said about heat signature cameras and grabbed a jacket from someone's chair, looking up at the ceiling corners. There was a tiny red light in the corner near his old desk that I hadn't noticed before. Definitely not standard office equipment. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. I threw the jacket up and it caught on the camera mount, covering the lens and hopefully blocking whatever feed Patrick had been watching. More tiny red lights were visible now that I knew what to look for. At least 4 more cameras hidden around the office space. Each one I could cover meant less advantage for Patrick, though I had no idea how many he'd installed over the months. Patrick was getting more frustrated with the phantom typing and empty cubicles, his movements getting wilder and less controlled with the crowbar. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a book of matches, lighting one and dropping it into a trash can full of paper. The papers caught immediately and smoke started rising as he moved to another trash can, lighting more fires as he went. Within seconds, the sprinkler system activated in that section, water spraying down and mixing with the smoke to create even more chaos. The water made the floor slippery and Patrick almost fell, catching himself on a desk while still holding that crowbar in one hand. The combination of sirens, strobing lights, smoke, and water spray turned the office into complete sensory overload that was hard to navigate. My clothes were getting soaked from the sprinklers as I kept moving, trying to stay ahead of Patrick while others escaped through the stairwell. The smoke was getting thicker despite the water, making it harder to breathe and see where Patrick was in the chaos. My phone buzzed with a text from the dispatcher, and I saw the battery was down to 12%. The message said police were entering the building, but they had to clear each floor for safety, which would take time. Patrick suddenly appeared through the smoke near the supply closet where two coworkers were trying to hide behind a filing cabinet. I grabbed the nearest fire extinguisher and ran toward them, pulling the pin and spraying white foam directly at Patrick's face from behind. The chemical cloud hit him hard and he stumbled backward, swinging the crowbar blindly while coughing and trying to wipe his eyes. One of the coworkers tried to run past him, but the crowbar caught their arm and tore through their shirt, blood immediately soaking the fabric. We dragged them away from Patrick, who was still rubbing his eyes and cursing, pulling them into the conference room where someone ripped off their shirt to press against the wound. I typed a quick text to the dispatcher about the injury, while others helped apply pressure to stop the bleeding. The dispatcher texted back immediately with instructions to barricade the door with everything we could move. We started stacking tables and chairs against the door while Patrick's footsteps got closer. Then his crowbar slammed into the door, making everyone jump back. The deadbolt was holding, but I could see the door frame starting to crack with each hit. My manager was in the corner having a complete breakdown, sobbing about how she should have seen the warning signs and never hired me for the position. I grabbed her shoulders and told her we needed her help tying door handles together with computer cords to make them harder to open. She nodded and started gathering cords from nearby desks, her hands shaking, but at least she had something to focus on now. Patrick changed tactics and started working on the door hinges with his crowbar, metal scraping against metal as he pried at the pins. We realized we didn't have much time and started wedging more furniture against the door, using our belts to tie the handles together while the frame kept cracking. My phone buzzed with a text from the building engineer who said there was a service shaft behind a panel in the conference room that connected to a mechanical room below. We started looking frantically along the walls while Patrick kept attacking the door, finally finding a panel near the corner that looked different from the others. Half the group wanted everyone to try the shaft, but I said we should split up because someone needed to keep Patrick focused here while others escaped. After a quick argument, we agreed, even though splitting up felt dangerous, but staying together wasn't working either. I told them I'd stay and keep Patrick talking through the door while putting my phone on speaker, so the dispatcher could hear everything. Two coworkers started quietly removing the panel screws while I moved closer to the door and said his name to get his attention. Patrick stopped hitting the door and demanded to know why I took his job, his voice full of rage but something else too. I told him honestly that I just needed work to pay my rent, and didn't know anything about him when I applied. He screamed that I'd stolen 5 years of his life, 5 years of building client relationships and proving himself, and now I had it after 2 weeks. The pain in his voice was real, even mixed with the anger, and I could hear him breathing hard on the other side of the door. Behind me, the panel came loose and the first coworker started climbing into the narrow shaft, having to squeeze through sideways. Patrick started hitting the door again and I kept talking, telling him I understood he was hurt, but this wasn't going to fix anything. He laughed bitterly and said I didn't understand anything about losing everything you worked for to someone who didn't even know your name. The second coworker disappeared into the shaft while Patrick ranted about being invisible, being treated like he didn't exist after giving everything to this company. More people were getting ready to climb through, but we needed to keep Patrick focused on this room and not searching for other ways in. I asked him about the cameras he'd installed, and he actually sounded proud, saying he'd been watching for months, learning our schedules and habits. The violation of it made my skin crawl, but I kept him talking while others escaped, asking how long he'd been planning this. He said from the day they moved him to maintenance, the day they decided he wasn't good enough anymore despite perfect reviews for years. Another coworker squeezed into the shaft and I heard Patrick testing the door again, checking how much the frame had weakened. My phone showed 8% battery and I worried about losing contact with the dispatcher who was recording everything for evidence. Patrick went quiet for a moment, then said he knew people were escaping because he could hear movement in the walls from his maintenance knowledge. I told him most of us were still here, which was partly true, trying to buy more time for the others to get through the shaft. He started attacking the door harder and faster, the frame splintering more with each hit as the last two coworkers climbed into the shaft. Only my manager and I were left with the injured coworker who couldn't move easily with their arm wound still bleeding through the makeshift bandage. Patrick got one hinge loose and the door shifted, hanging at an angle that created a gap he could almost reach through. We pushed more furniture but knew it wouldn't hold much longer as he worked on the second hinge with determination. The dispatcher texted that police were on the 8th floor, just 2 floors below us, but Patrick was going to get through before they arrived. I moved closer to the door and said loud enough for him to hear that I knew about the keyed car and the dead flowers he left on my chair. Patrick stopped hitting the door for a second and screamed that we were all thieves who took what he built. His voice cracked and went higher, then lower, like something was breaking inside him. My phone buzzed with a text from the 2 coworkers who'd gone through the shaft saying they made it to the mechanical room. They were looking for another way out, but we had to keep pretending everyone was still trapped here with us. I texted back quickly while Patrick ranted about 5 years of work stolen by people who didn't care about him. My manager was shaking next to me, and the injured coworker was getting paler from blood loss. Patrick's voice got louder and more broken as he talked about building every client relationship from nothing. Then he went completely quiet, and we heard his footsteps moving away from the door. The sudden silence made my skin crawl worse than his yelling had. Nobody moved or even breathed loud as we listened to figure out where he went. The emergency lights kept flickering and making shadows jump on the walls. My phone showed 6% battery, and I turned the brightness all the way down to save power. Minutes passed with no sound from Patrick, and the waiting was making everyone more scared. The injured coworker started moaning softly, and my manager pressed her hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. Then we smelled smoke and saw it starting to creep under the door in thin gray wisps. Patrick had set something on fire in the hallway, and the smoke was getting thicker fast. The sprinklers turned on outside with a loud hissing sound, but smoke kept coming in. The dispatcher texted to stay low and use wet clothing to block the gap under the door. We grabbed jackets and shirts, ran them under the water cooler, and stuffed them against the door bottom. The smoke was already making my eyes burn and throat feel raw. Outside, we heard sirens getting louder, and my phone buzzed with the dispatcher confirming fire trucks were arriving. Police units were also coming, but she warned it would take several minutes for them to reach our floor safely. The smoke was building up near the ceiling, and we all got down on our hands and knees where the air was clearer. My manager was crying and holding the injured coworker's hand while trying to keep pressure on his wound. The wet clothes helped, but smoke still leaked through and made breathing harder. Then we heard footsteps coming back and the sound of metal on metal. Patrick had found bolt cutters somewhere and was cutting through the chains we'd wrapped around the door handles. The snapping sounds as each link broke made my stomach twist. I texted the dispatcher what was happening while trying not to cough from the smoke. Patrick was working fast, and we could see the chains getting looser through the door gap. We pushed more furniture, but knew it wouldn't matter once he got the chains off. My hands were shaking as I held my phone up and started recording video. If something bad happened to us, there needed to be proof of what Patrick did. The phone picked up his heavy breathing and the sound of chains falling to the floor. He started using the crowbar on the door again and yelled that he was taking back what was his. I made sure the recording caught every word while tears ran down my face from the smoke. My phone buzzed with a text from the coworkers who'd escaped through the shaft. They found another stairwell and were heading down to meet the emergency responders. They promised to tell them exactly where we were trapped. Patrick got the chains completely off and started prying at the door with the crowbar. The frame was so damaged that it started bending inward with each pull. We pressed ourselves against the back wall as far from the door as we could get. Some people were crying, and others just stared at the widening gap where Patrick would come through. The smoke was getting thicker and making it hard to see across the room. My manager was whispering prayers while holding the injured coworker who'd gone unconscious. Patrick got one side of the door open about 6 inches, and we could see his face through the gap. His eyes were wild and unfocused, like he wasn't really seeing us anymore. He pulled harder on the crowbar, and the gap got wider with wood splintering and cracking. My phone buzzed, and the dispatcher's text said police were on our floor and moving toward us. She told us to stay quiet and not make sudden moves when they arrived. Patrick was pulling so hard on the door that his face was red and veins stood out on his neck. The gap was almost wide enough for him to squeeze through, and we had nowhere left to run. I kept recording everything while trying not to shake the phone too much. The smoke was making everyone cough, and our eyes were streaming tears. Patrick got the door open enough to push his shoulder through and started forcing his way in. That's when we heard shouting from down the hallway and boots running on the floor. My manager was shaking bad next to me, and her eyes looked empty, like she wasn't really there anymore. I grabbed her hand and squeezed it while telling her to count her breaths with me. 1 in, 2 out, trying to keep us both from losing it completely. The police were getting closer, and we could hear them yelling commands, but Patrick wasn't backing down from our door. He shoved his whole arm through the gap he'd made, swinging the crowbar wild, trying to hit anyone close enough. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and brought it down hard on his arm where it came through. He screamed and yanked his arm back so fast the crowbar dropped on our side of the door. Someone shouted, "Police!" right outside, and Patrick spun away from us. There was running and more shouting, and then that electric crackling sound a taser makes. Patrick hit the floor hard, and we could hear it through the wall. The police were all over him in seconds, one officer on each arm while another secured the crowbar. They had him in cuffs fast while he was still twitching from the taser. We stayed frozen against the back wall until an officer pulled our barricade away and opened what was left of our door. He said we were safe now, but nobody moved for a few seconds, like we couldn't believe it was real. The paramedics came in right after and went straight to the coworker who'd been hit earlier. His arm was still bleeding through the shirt we'd wrapped around it, and they started working on him while checking the rest of us. One paramedic told us the security guard downstairs was awake, but had a bad concussion, and they were taking him to the hospital first. They loaded him on a stretcher while another paramedic checked my throat for smoke damage. A detective showed up while I was still shaking from everything and started asking questions about what happened. I handed him my phone with all the recordings and texts from the whole thing, explaining how it started at noon when my manager warned me about Patrick coming at 3. He scrolled through everything while taking notes and asking me to clarify times and details. My manager kept apologizing over and over, saying she should have done more, should have shut the office down when she found out Patrick was coming. The HR people showed up with their tablets and papers, talking about counseling services and paid leave, while also asking lots of questions about who knew what and when. You could tell they were worried about getting sued because they kept asking about documentation and whether proper procedures were followed. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Just kept seeing Patrick's face through that door gap. The next morning, a victim advocate called and asked to meet with me at the courthouse. She explained that Patrick was charged with attempted murder, plus a bunch of other stuff like assault, making threats and false imprisonment. She said I'd have to testify at the trial and walked me through what that would mean, how long it might take, what questions they'd ask. She gave me a folder full of papers about victim rights and support services. I started therapy that same week because the panic attacks were hitting me randomly, like in the grocery store or just sitting at home. The therapist taught me this thing where you name 5 things you can see, 4 you can hear, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste to ground yourself when the panic starts. She said my reactions were totally normal for what happened and gave me exercises to do when I felt triggered. We worked on breathing techniques and she explained how trauma affects your brain and body. The company went crazy with security changes after that. Within 2 weeks, they had new cameras everywhere. Not the hidden ones like Patrick's, but real security cameras with signs posted. They hired 3 full-time guards instead of just 1 and put in panic buttons at every desk. The stairwell doors got new locks that couldn't be jammed and they installed a whole new alarm system. They brought in some expert to do a threat assessment and started making everyone take training on recognizing warning signs. The expert said there had been red flags with Patrick for months that nobody reported properly. They changed the rules so that fired employees had to turn in all their stuff immediately and couldn't come back to the building for any reason. Building access got stricter too, with everyone having to badge in and out and visitors needing approval in advance. The new security guards actually walked the floors instead of just sitting at the desk downstairs. They also started doing background checks on everyone, even current employees, which made some people mad, but I was glad for it. My sleep was still messed up weeks later, and I'd wake up thinking I heard footsteps or Patrick's voice. 2 weeks after everything happened, the company offered me a transfer to their office across town, and I took it without thinking twice. The commute went from 15 minutes to an hour each way, but I'd rather sit in traffic than walk past that desk every day. Leo and Claire took transfers too while Tom decided to stay, said the new security made him feel safe enough. My new desk was on the 3rd floor of a building with actual security guards who checked badges and walked the floors, not just one guy who could be scared into calling in sick. The prosecutor's office kept calling with updates, and one morning Patrick's lawyer left a voicemail asking if we could discuss a plea deal. My hands shook deleting it, but the victim advocate called right after and explained Patrick was getting evaluated by psychiatrists, while his lawyer tried to avoid trial. She forwarded me parts of the evaluation that talked about Patrick losing his dad right before the demotion to maintenance, how he'd stopped taking his medication for bipolar disorder, how the job had been the only stable thing in his life for 5 years. None of it excused what he did, but it helped me understand how someone goes from employee of the month to hiding cameras in the office ceiling. 3 months crawled by with depositions and meetings until the prosecutor called to say Patrick agreed to plead guilty to everything. 8 years in prison with mandatory mental health treatment and a permanent restraining order that meant he could never contact any of us again. I actually slept through the night for the first time after hearing that. No more waking up at 3 in the morning thinking I heard footsteps. My old manager started sending me emails about all the changes she was making, new background check requirements and threat assessment protocols, and actually following through on the security promises this time. She'd attach photos of the new panic buttons and emergency procedures posted everywhere, trying to show she learned from what happened. I signed up for self-defense classes at the gym near my new office, and spent Tuesday and Thursday evenings learning how to break holds and create distance. The instructor was this older woman who'd been attacked years ago, and she taught us to be aware without being scared of everything, how to trust our instincts without letting fear control our lives. Learning to throw a proper punch and break someone's grip on my wrist made me feel less helpless, like I had some control back. 6 months passed and I was actually enjoying work again at the new location. The panic attacks that used to hit me in elevators or when someone walked up behind my desk had gotten down to maybe once a week, and therapy helped me recognize the triggers before they got bad. My therapist had me write down 3 good things every day, even tiny stuff like good coffee or making it through a meeting without my heart racing, and slowly the good days started outnumbering the bad ones. I kept in touch with everyone who was there that day through a group chat we started. We'd check in when someone had a rough day, or celebrate when Claire got through her first deposition without crying, or when Leo went back to working late without being scared. We understood each other in a way nobody else could because we'd all been trapped on that floor together. All thought we might die at our desks. The security guard who Patrick attacked came to our monthly dinners once he recovered, said his concussion was worth it if it meant we all got out okay. When new people at my current job ask about my worst day at work, I tell them the truth. But I focus on how 8 of us worked together to survive, how Leo created distractions and Claire pulled the fire alarm and everyone looked out for each other. I talk about the prosecutor who made sure Patrick couldn't hurt anyone else, and the therapist who helped me stop flinching at sudden noises, and the self-defense instructor who gave me confidence back. I'm building something good now with better locks on my apartment door, and a security system I actually use and real friends who get why I always sit facing the exit. My commute might be longer, and I might check behind me more than most people, but I'm here, and I'm okay. And that's more than I thought I'd have when Patrick smiled at me with that crowbar in his hand. That's where we'll leave it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I really do love sharing these moments. Hope you carry a little of this good energy with you. If you want more, hit that subscribe button and come back soon.